This one has a warning for sensitive content involving gore, animal death, and dubious consent. It was called Durum, a simple name taken from the infinite golden fields that surrounded it. Don't bother looking for it now, it's since been burned to the ground. It was a shame, though, yet a necessary one. Before everything, though, it was my home. It was a beautiful place at twilight, the way the sky's royal gradient of orange and purple came to an abrupt halt when it met the earth. It was an endless sprawl of gold that went on for kilometers across the Saskatchewan flats. Dawn was even prettier, adding tones of baby blue and tickled pink. Summer skies were dotted with fluffy clouds and cut off at the horizon by yellow wheat. Aging white paint on most of the town's structures. Green vines and leaves standing out across the hardy brown soil that kids would run through. It was the idealistic farming community, stuck in the middle of bumfuck nowhere. And while we weren't strangers to the outside world, having plenty of internet access to stay connected to the modern age, our Metis and European ancestry still brought a rich foundation for myths and tales. It was just before the start of the summer, somewhere near the end of May. My mother had taken me to visit my grandfather on his farm, and I was bored as could be. It was like any usual visit to one's grandparents. You say hello, get a big damp old person kiss on the cheek. They comment on how big you've gotten. Yada yada yada. Then the next 3 hours you're kind of left to your own devices, but are expected to not interrupt the grown-ups with loud noises. So I went exploring. I wandered around the farmyard, walking through fields and feeling my stomach rage as I anxiously awaited supper. I snuck into Grandpa's hunting room, awestruck by the buck's head mounted on the wall. I ran my finger over one of his steel point arrows, and I got a small cut. Wasn't too bad, but I stuck my finger in my mouth to suck the blood to hide it from my mother. Eventually, when a boy runs out of things to do, he'll settle for what's left, and for me, that was reading. Grandpa had a random assortment of books he'd collected from farmers markets, just to have something that would stimulate my young mind. I found one that looked mildly entertaining, although it was midway into a series that I'd never even started, and I curled up in a window nook to let the fading sun illuminate the pages. The story was pretty comedic, featuring a pair of brothers who disliked one another, and in one section the elder told his sibling that if he looked into the sun long enough, he would see a magic mark that would lead to buried treasure. Now, if I had read that today, I would have gotten quite the kick out of it, but being 9 and not bothering to finish reading the passage, my head turned left to gaze at the burning orange ball that was setting in the distance. Watching and staring, the spot forming behind my eyelids as I blinked, the sun lowering beyond the horizon. I was getting so close to achieving enlightenment that I didn't even hear my mother come in. My attention was only pulled when she screamed and pulled me away from the window. "Percy!" She yanked my arm and turned me towards her, and she looked me in the eye. The sunspot made her even scarier from my perspective, as it blotted out one of her own eyes. "What were you doing just now?" My hands nervously lifted to the point over my shoulder, but as my head tried to follow, my mother held the side that turned toward the window. I was just watching the sunset. What's going on?" Grandpa was in the doorway now. My mother spoke to him in an older tongue that I wasn't familiar with. It sounded vaguely like the French classics I would pass by in the halls at school. When I saw Grandpa's eyes widen, only for him to take off into the house, and that's when panic set in my heart. My breathing quickened as my mom picked me up and hurried to get my coat and shoes on. Okay, Percy. Say goodbye to Grandpa. We have to go home now. She was trying not to sound panicked, but she was failing horribly. Tears welled up in my eyes as she tightened my shoelaces for me. Bye, Grandfather, I blubbered out. He came back into the hallway, only offering that presence as a response. He was too focused on wrapping a cord of beads and feathers around the butt of his rifle, whispering to himself the whole time. Just as he finished tightening it, he shouted to my mother in that strange French and pointed for the door. I thought he was kicking us out. My mother nodded and carried me out to the pickup, tossed me into the passenger seat, and we were already rolling down the bumpy gravel road when the first gunshot rang out. I tried to turn around, but my mom pushed my shoulder to sit me back down, making a harsh one-handed left turn onto the old highway. Don't you look! I tried not to sob as the gunshots rang out, slowly and growing more quiet as we sped away. It took all I had not to break out into full tears, clutching my hands together tightly between my legs. My mom's eyes were flickering back and forth constantly between the rolling cement and the rearview mirror, as though something were about to climb its way back into the truck at any moment. We were home in a matter of minutes, though Mom took the mailbox off the post in the process. She looked past me and out the passenger window, and once she seemed confident about something known only to her, the key left in the ignition and her forehead rested on the wheel. I called her name, asking her what was wrong. With a deep sigh, my maternal guardian sat up, turned toward me so her eyes could meet mine, and said 5 words that would live on in my head for the rest of my life. Do not provoke the Sunchild. Chapter 1. It was the day before the festival. The farmers were out drawing in the first batch of crops of the season, and everybody else was outside to enjoy the summer air. Bright blue skies streaked with white, a soft wind that kissed my cheeks and cooled my sweaty back. It was the true ideal of a summer day, one that I could enjoy to the fullest since it was summer vacation. Any time that wasn't spent at home or church, my friends and I were out exploring the town. For years we had planned to explore every nook and cranny of Durum, but our parents were always too worried about our safety to let us go wandering around on our own. Now, though, at a bright and strong 11 years each, our parents had finally let us go. That or the volatile squealing of our puberty-addled voices was the final straw in annoying them into agreeing. With the consistency of our expeditions, Mom was always making sure I'd have a lunch packed for the day. I'd wake up late into the morning, skipping out on breakfast to run downstairs, grab the refilled lunch tin on the counter, and hurry outside with a loud, "See ya." The tin locked into place perfectly on the back of my bike, and I'd pedal down to the corner. Lacey McIntyre was always there before me, and today was no different. Her mid-length brunette hair tap-danced on the shoulders of her bright red t-shirt, in contrast to my plain gray one. She was smacking on bubble gum and had Douglin's leash wrapped around her forearm. I stopped my bike and gave the black lab a scratch behind the ears. He was a beautiful dog, but almost unfathomably loyal. He only performed tricks at her command, no one else's. Made sense. She'd raised him since he was a puppy, growing up together, thick as thieves. The only thing Lacey seemed to love more than that dog was the Lord. "What's wrong with you?" she said before punching me in the shoulder. "Can't you wake up on time for once in your life?" I just smiled back gently in response, before unzipping my bag and pulling out the map and pointing out where we'd left off. I'd always left the choice up to her. Didn't really make much of a difference to me where we went. It was just fun being with my friend. Today was a big one. We made for the horizon, We wanted to reach the point on a certain road that led out of Durum that climbed upwards on just enough of an incline that the distant sprawling fields beyond it were obscured. To get there, though, we would be traveling to the opposite side of town. It wasn't unfamiliar territory, but it would be one of the longer treks of the summer. Asphalt sizzled under the sun, and its rocky stench flew into our nostrils, carried by the wind racing across our faces. Bird song and quiet engine rumbles broke through the summer gusts, the latter taking over as we entered the downtown area. Lace would ring her bell to alert other pedestrians on the sideway, leading the way to the most important pit stop an 11-year-old could make: Mr. Mayer's ice cream parlor. It was a relic of its time. The dusty old shop still operated strong into the 2010s, thanks to the support of our local dairy farms. We locked up our bikes on the rack, and Lace tied Duglin down before we headed inside. He stayed as he was told without so much as of a yelp. The little bell dinged upon our entry, but Mr. Mayer was nowhere to be seen at the moment, and instead, to our surprise, Thomas Warrens was sitting at the counter, slapping his hands against it in the strange rhythm of a song that only he knew. He turned and grinned widely upon seeing us, waving wildly.
"Oh, hey guys."
"Hi, Tom." Lace pulled up to the stool on Tom's left, an eye on hers.
"Didn't see you on Sunday school yesterday."
Tom shrugged, looking back to the shop.
"Nah, school's boring." Blew it off.
Lace punched his shoulder quickly, then turned to whisper as Mr. Mayers came out.
"Well, that's rude, Tom." "Ah, children, welcome, welcome. What can I do for you today?"
Mayers was dressed in his usual attire, the classic white and pink pinstripe uniform and small paper cap you'd associate with an old-timey place like this. He leaned across the width of the counter, hands planted wide apart with elbows outlocked as he offered his services.
I
was struggling to decide. Ice cream was great, sure, but I never felt a particular inclination for one flavor over another, regularly leaving me with analysis paralysis, as my mother lovingly put it. So it was up to Lace to order for me. She rolled her eyes and sighed before addressing Myers directly.
"He'll have a plain vanilla. I'll have fresh strawberry."
Myers laughed, ice cream glasses clinking as he prepared.
"Ha! That's the same as ever. One vanilla, one strawberry. Coming right up."
"And a double Dutch chocolate death for me," Tom chimed in. Mayer's gaze finally addressed the boy. His smile tightened and shrunk as he prepared a third glass without reply.
"The festival's tomorrow, you know. Did you even do anything for the class project?"
Lace continued her inquisition against Tom. Tom kept smiling and shook his head in an exaggerated fashion.
"Nope, I just had Colby do all my work for me. Only cost me a halo foiled Charizard."
"It was literally just arts and craft, Thomas. We're supposed to contribute to the festival," Lace pouted.
"Well, of course I will. I'll be eating lots of yummy snacks and riding the rides, and hell, nothing will go to waste."
I couldn't help laughing at Tom's obliviousness, despite Lace and Myers' clear dismay. "Yeah, well, Mom was pretty on me last year for helping out. She's backed off a lot this time, though. I still did it. Made the paper flower and everything, but..." I shrugged, going in for another scoop.
"Doesn't really matter if we do it, though," Tom replied. "I mean, even if I cared, Rob and Nancy just take over anyways and fix everything the way they want it to be. Not really any point in me getting involved, right?"
"You know, it's not good to be dismissing the Lord's teaching there, young Tommy," Myers inserted, slopping a scoop of chocolate dessert into his glass. Tom didn't answer. He was too busy digging around in his pocket for the change to pay for his morning treat. He always seemed to be snacking, or had money for it, considering how pudgy he was. When the ice cream was slid his way, he offered a quick thanks and pushed the money back before getting right to work.
Thomas, you're such a pig,
Lace snorted. I just took another small bite and leaned around her to see Tom.
Yeah, Tom, you can't just enjoy the reaping without the sowing. Or, however the Murph put it. I wouldn't know. Wasn't there for the lesson.
Tom smirked back, wiping a brown streak from the corner of his mouth. It was then my turn to receive a jab to the ribs.
Don't call her that. It's Miss Murphy,
Lace corrected me.
God, you two are impossible sometimes.
Tom and I shrugged in unison and kept to our cold treats. Lace was surprisingly devout for her age, whereas I had just grown indifferent to the beliefs of my household. As for Tom, I just didn't think he cared particularly, nor did his parents try with him. They already had his older brother Rob to be the active faith child. Mr. Myers turned to me with a warm smile next. "And are you looking forward to the festival there, young Percy?" I went a little wild-eyed and I shrugged. Even if my mouth wasn't full of ice cream, I didn't really have an answer. Again, no preference.
He just likes the rides the best.
Lace finished her dish and let the spoon clatter against the glass, pushing it across the counter.
Thanks, Mr. Myers.
She pulled on my sleeve, and I simply stood up, leaving my half-finished bowl in its place. Myers nodded, drying off some cutlery with a cloth. "Now, where are you two off to this fine day?"
"Just around town, exploring,"
Lace and I answered simultaneously. He smirked and waved us off before gesturing to Tom. "Well then, take this one with you." "Hey!" was the last sound we heard as we stepped back out into the sidewalk. Putting our helmets back on, Lace turned to me.
"You didn't finish your ice cream. Are you feeling all right?"
"Yeah, I'm fine. I just don't want to ruin my appetite for lunch, I guess."
"You know wasting any food is a sin."
"I'm sinful for not clearing my plate?"
"Well, yeah, we all are in different ways."
"Okay, Mom. Is that why you're like that to Tom?" I asked, mantling my bike. Lace clipped her helmet in place and began to untie an excited Dougland.
"No, it's because he skips out on a lot of other things. He's gonna go to hell if he keeps acting like that."
I interrupted her midway through the thought. "Whoa, hey, come on, Lace. Don't get like that. Let's just get going, yeah?" Sometimes she had a habit of getting too evangelical. Lace seemed to realize how weird it was to say those things about a friend, and she shook her head quickly.
"Yeah, I'm sorry, let's go."
We started back down on the trek, pedaling down the sidewalks and past street displays with ease, waving through flower stalls and kicking up petals in our wake, their sweet scent lingering for but a moment before hot pavement and restaurant exhaust took back over. I quickly swiped the back of my arm over my forehead, trying to catch whatever sweat was there before I could lose my balance. As my fingers wrapped back around the handlebar, I took in the feeling of the sun's warmth on my exposed arms. The pavement started to become more cracked and warbled as we began rolling past the fields. My nose recoiled at the distant smell of manure carried on the wind, and the slow rumbling of tractor engines became persistent in the background. Dougland faithfully followed along, tail wagging and tongue flailing about. We had to stop for a moment so Lace could call him back from his rolling around in a bush, but he was quick to return. Soon enough we arrived at a crossroads. Continuing down the west road would take us to the endless horizon that we sought. But since he was there, we decided to pull up to one of the corners for another rest. "Hey, Farmer Jenkins, how goes the farming?" He was pouring the contents of a mulch bag around the base of a tree when he noticed us. "Ho, ho, the harvest comes." He stood up and pushed on his back. I could hear the popping of fluid bubbles within his spine, as was expected of an old man like himself, though he was still a hard worker tending to his plots. His wide circle glasses made his eyes look tiny beneath the wide straw hat. "And where might you two be off today?" With one hand pinching my nose, I pointed down the correct road with the other as a car came over the edge of the incline. Dublin barked and ran up to Jenkins for some pets, which were offered willingly by the old man. Lace actually used the words, "We're heading west to the plains today." "Oh, is that so?" Jenkins laughed, playfully scratching behind the kind hound's ears. "Well, best be careful that the strangle doesn't get you, huh? Ha ha!" "We'll make sure, Mr. Jenkins." Lace offered him a smile before moving her bike closer to the side of the road. She pulled on my shirt sleeve to do the same. "Oh, that reminds me. Percy." Jenkins turned around from Dougland and into a basket behind him. He turned back toward me with some onions and turnips in hand. I already knew what these were for, despite my disdain for the latter vegetable. "Your mother was asking for these. Please see that she gets them." "Yeah, sure thing." I carefully waded down the side of the shallow bank separating the road from the farmland, hopping over the running water beneath. When I approached the fence to take the vegetables, Jenkins' face changed in an instant. His eyes widened, and the contents of his hands dropped as he pushed his palms into the right side of my face. As I fell into the bank, I heard only one word over the roaring engine. "Car!" An elbow jabbed into my spine. I exhaled against my will, sucking in a slurry of runoff water that I desperately tried to spit back out. Metal splashed and crumpled against something above us before the horns started to blare out. I tried lifting my face from the bank, but Lace was still on top of me. Only after she finally moved could I stop partaking in the taint of emoja. "Percy, are you all right?" Lace helped me get up. Her arm was scratched and bleeding, but she was fine otherwise. I had pains rattling up and down my torso from landing on rocks, and a touch of my fingertips to my cheek found an open wound on my cheek. But I was also okay. My heart was going at 1,000,000 kilometers an hour. But I was okay. Shaky but alive. Alive. I nodded in response, then looked in horror at the scene before us. The car had flown down that road from the west and smashed through the fence, coming to a halt upon smashing into the tree. We were still alive. Twisted metal smoked and groaned, but no fire could be seen. Blood trickled and tickled beneath my chin. The glass was cracked, yet held its form. We were alive. Alive. It didn't seem real. We were okay. Jenkins was on the ground to the side as well, though he was dreadfully shaky and seemed to be struggling to get back up. And Dougland? Mangled black fur meshed with bark. The tree was painted crimson. I could make out a protruding jaw from the wreck, and my attention was caught seeing two of the canine's teeth fall from the mess. Lace stumbled slowly toward the tree, struggling to climb the bank's edge. How the hell were we still alive? As she finally crawled across the grass, the driver's side door swung open, and out stumbled Miss Murphy, the head of the local Sunday school. Blood was pouring from a line across the width of her forehead, and she was quick to join everyone on the ground as she dropped to her knees. Everybody was offering blood to the earth today. Miss Murphy wobbled around, just standing on her knees, but after a moment her gaze seemed to meet mine, and her reaction nearly matched Jenkins as the car had been coming. Her eyes widened and her mouth slowly fell agape. She reached her arms towards the sunny sky, sat on the back of her feet, and began swaying in prayer. Up and down, wavering her arms from sky to ground. worshipping at a sight of destruction caused by her own hand. Why? Oh, why? The intensity of her voice grew as she repeated the same word over and over again, seemingly begging for forgiveness. Perhaps she had hit her head during the wreck. The wound on her face certainly sold that answer. Or maybe she was already going through some episode when she'd gotten behind the wheel of that car. I clutched my aching stomach, watching this woman go completely mad. My breathing slowed. I saw Jenkins crawl over to her and grip her shirt sleeves as Murphy just kept her arms waving on the heavens, still shouting that singular word, why? What have you done, Jane? Hell, I could smell it on your breath, Jenkins shouted with fury, his country accent becoming far more pronounced. My focus then shifted back to my friend. I could see the tears running down her face, but she ignored them. Her hands were busy cradling Douglin's head, or what parts she could reach, scratching behind ripped ears and whispering to her deceased friend. The stains ran down her arms and stood out even against her bright shirt. I could feel the rapidly dying hope in her heart, just wanting one last chance to pet him, to give him scratches, to tell him what a good boy he was. But all the while, a drunken Miss Murphy continued preaching to the sun, voice straining over the sound of sirens on the horizon. Why? Chapter 2. Dampness, sea salt, dew, the shrieking of seagulls and the commotion of the docks. Gray light forced its way through the cracks of my box. I saw the blue roofs of old buildings, smelled the fresh baked goods, and heard the screams of their French bakers trying to sell them in the early hours of the morn. The container rattled and rumbled down the cobblestone road, and I clutched the layer of topsoil beneath me with fervor. It caked together for a moment, but a quick rummaging of fingers let the dirt fall back to the floor as particles rejoining the hole. My knees ached from being cramped in this vessel for weeks, but it would be months still before I'd be able to leave. The journey ahead was to be great and long, but there, in that new world, we would find new lands to sow. Percy? My eyes fluttered open to the sound of my mother's voice. Orange light forced its way through the cracks of my curtain. I saw the posterless ceiling above me. I smelled the annual rhubarb wafting from the kitchen, and heard my mom bustling around as she finished her arrangements for the festival. As the wild arrangements of vegetables filled my nose, I sat up and stretched from my evening nap. Not a normal time to sleep, mind you, but tonight was the night after all. Figured I should catch a little shut-eye so I wasn't passing out too early into the celebrations. The doorbell rang. Percy, can you get that? Well, it's probably... Lace, yeah, I got it. I slid off the bed and I yawned, my feet lazily plopping along the upstairs hallway and down the stairs toward the front door. Turning the doorknob, I leaned sideways to peer out the gap into the doorway. Lace was standing there all dolled up in a pretty blue dress and skirt, although I don't know how girls' clothing works, and as ever, her woolly black sweater over it all. She never took that damn thing off. And despite the fact the sleeves were so long, only her fingertips were poking out from it. Hey! She waved excitedly, her painted-on blush pushed higher by her smile. Aye, I responded with flattened lips and a high monotone voice before pulling and swinging on the door handle to let her in. You ready for the festival? Lace gave my attire a look. Normal jeans, t-shirt, and a zip-up hoodie. The look concluded in confused disapproval. I shrugged. Yeah, I just want to hit the lines before they get too long. Lace nodded, looking around the place. Her fingers traced the edge of the console table. and I could see her observing my mother's decorative decision-making. She tapped the underside of a potted plant's leaf, the sprout splitting off in two separate directions, as though its branches were diametrically opposed to one another. Next to that, a family photo, one with Dad still in it. No one ever commented on it. "Oh, Lacey, right on time." Mom came around the corner, carrying her giant soup pot with the lid taped down at the seam. "Well, let's move then, Percy. Lock the door on the way out." I nodded and held the door for the two ladies, then followed them out to the truck. Lacey had already taken the front seat and gave me a teasing raspberry. I just took the back and kept an eye on Mom's pot so it didn't spill over. Mom turned the key and the truck roared to life before easing onto the street and taking us to the festival. The sun had already set, but glimmers of orange still speckled the sky as the stars came out to play. Distant wheat fields had turned to a dark ocean of grain, shifting in the evening breeze. And on the edge of town, near the tree line of our closest forest, the yearly carnival awaited us. Hopping onto the stamped-down grass, I was nearly blinded by the bright, whirling lights. Loud dinging and music pumped its way out of the fairgrounds, meshed with countless voices and laughter. Mom was already going off on her own to deliver her dish to the church group, but Lace wasn't interested in just basking in the artificial elation. I stumbled forward as she gripped my wrist and yanked me inside, weaving me through the crowds of families waiting for their turn at the spinning teacups or the big blanket slide. Obnoxious, whimsical pipe organs blared over someone's radio playing Britney Spears' Toxic. The potent stench of cigarettes and popcorn salt filled my nostrils, but underneath, a sweetness of petals. I was curious if Lace was perhaps wearing perfume. "Thomas?" Her voice brought my attention back as we strode up to a bench with 3 kids situated on it. I say situated as each was seated vastly differently. Tom sat at the back end of the bench, his shoes getting fairground sludge all over a formerly viable place for someone to sit. All the while, he tossed back popcorn by the handful. Judging from the layered bags, I could guess he was already on bag number 3. I still had no idea where he put it. The kid was broad, sure, but not rotund. His older brother Rob was seated properly, back up straight and feet flat. Being the aspiring church youth leader he was, the boy still wore a button-up polo, even to a for-fun event like this. His hair was slicked back and clean cut compared to Tom's rompous mop, but still, for being even more of a stickler than Lace, that didn't make him an asshole. He smiled softly and waved to us as we approached. "Happy harvest, you two." And to his right, her arm furled and curled around his, was Nancy LeBlanc. Hell, every guy in 7th grade swooned over Nancy LeBlanc, horn dogs as we all were. Her smooth white skin contrasted by long, sleek black hair that rested now against Rob's shoulder, as well as being one of the most filled-out girls in school. It was pretty easy to see why most guys regarded her as the cream of the crop. Hell, I recalled Colby Wetson spotting her at lunch one day and saying he'd plow every field of Durham just for a chance to let her plow him. And while I was not usually a man of preferences in any manner, I had to admit, Nancy had a charm that even I could not entirely ignore. Too bad to every single one of them. She had been going steady with the Robbie Warrens since the 5th grade, while the rest of us were still shitting ourselves over stories about the strangle. They were made for each other anyways, being a few years ahead of us and also both quite devout. That didn't stop Nancy's fingers from tracing circles atop Rob's thigh as she welcomed our approach. "Hey, you two." "Oh, happy harvest." Lace scratched her head before reaching over and slapping Tom's leg. He seemed to get the message and slid down to sit properly beside his brother.
How long have you guys been here? Rob pointed to his gluttonous sibling.
Well, this one's been here all evening. Got here about 15 minutes ago.
The line for strawberries is too long right now, Nancy added. A smirk seemed to crawl upon her face. You two having a good time then? I felt Lace nearly throw my hand back towards me. Oh, we just got here. Gonna hit the rides before it gets too late. Ain't that right, Piercy? I shrugged and nodded. Yeah, I think I want to hit the chainsaw this year.
Oh, yeah, finally gonna hit the big old 13.
Rob leaned forward and offered a light punch in the shoulder.
Lots of doors are about to open for you. There's more to come.
Tom crunched up his collection of paper bags and tossed them at, rather than into, an overflowing trash can.
Better get in the line before it breaks down again.
Lace rolled her eyes. Shut up, Tom.
No, seriously, that thing breaks down like constantly. Surprised it hasn't taken someone's head yet.
Rob shrugged.
You know, for once, as macabre as he puts it, it's true. Better get a move on.
Before I could even respond or continue the conversation beyond 2 minutes, Lace gave them, "Aye, thanks," and grabbed my wrist once more, dragging me back across the fair. I looked back and I tried to mouth a sorry their way, but they didn't seem to mind. All of them just paid me sly smiles. My cheeks grew hot from the implication. Being one of the more intense rides that came around, the chainsaw looked just like its namesake. Imagine a Ferris wheel, but instead in an elliptical shape with cages dangling and swinging freely at various points along the blade. It would spin around its perimeter, but then also tilt the entire angle of the blade back and forth. Hell, the ride looked like a stomach churner, and it required 2 people per cage, so the line naturally filtered itself of weak-stomach casuals and lonesome people. It was the only returning ride I hadn't been on, so when I expressed interest in it to Lace a few days prior, she immediately promised to be my partner. She was so excited and direct about it, saying how I never took the initiative on anything, and wanted to encourage it. I think she just really wanted to ride the chainsaw too. The attendant spun the machine around, trying to balance out the weight across the cages. The great metal thing clanked and groaned, and as I waited, my eyes began to spot the countless rust spots. A tiny voice in the back of my head started screaming about bolts breaking in half, or our cage being flung off into the woods, and I felt a lump form in my throat. Unconsciously, I slid my fingers into hers, and I squeezed for comfort. And she reciprocated. You must sow the seeds of your own life if you're going to reap anything of worth to yourself, Lace had preached beneath that tree, wagging a finger at me. I joked that she could be the proper nun at that rate, but she never replied. Instead, she rested her head back against the trunk, looking up at the leaves as her hand rested on Douglin's grave. The cage door creaked loudly. The attendant wiped his brow and waved us in, cigarette ash falling as he spoke between chapped, pursed lips. Come on now, get in there. Lace finally turned and smiled at me, gesturing for us to enter. I let her go first before sitting next to her. The carnival worker reached over me to strap us in, and his BO overwhelmed the blossom scent of my best friend. Kind of found the urge to gag, and a quick glance at Lace told me she was doing the same. Her fingers looked so delicate on that cross. The thought crossed my mind to offer physical comfort, but I knew better, and the urge didn't tempt me that strongly. When Lace turned my way, I haphazardly shot my gaze skywards as well. She could probably still see the redness in my cheeks at the time. My eyes glanced around the cage, inspecting every inch and ghoulishly trying to bet on which rusted bolt would give in first. With the scratch of his neckbeard, the attendant pulled himself out and slammed the door shut suddenly. I could feel the metal mesh just barely miss pinching the skin of my left arm, but my muscles still tensed at the idea of feeling it.
like the tension one feels upon seeing a needle in the movies. My heart was already pounding before the ride even began. The cage jolted upwards, and we both let out a quick scream, gripping the bar in front of us with amused fervor. We were both laughing and panting when it lurched upwards and stopped abruptly again and again. Between breaths, Lace pointed at me quickly before gripping the bar again. "You're scared, aren't you?" "I ain't scared," I said defiantly. My gaze turned further from her, looking out across Jenkins' fields. His tractor ran slow and smooth through the dirt, gathering vegetables in a quantity only God would know. The ride didn't scare me, just the idea of rattling metal in tight spaces, smoke rising from the engine. But then the chainsaw threw itself into full motion. Gravity seemed to change direction every few seconds as the cage tilted forwards, fell backwards, swooped low, and traveled high. We free fell and shouted our lungs out, and after getting a feel for the physics, the two of us pressed ourselves towards the handlebar as far as our seatbelts would let us. Forward, and on the downward, the entire cage tilted over and did a somersault. Lace and I cheered at our success, taking great delight in the thrill of the ride. We grabbed the rail as we ascended once more, and her pinky grazed my hand. A thought occurred, one that finally broke through the density of my social obliviousness. Perhaps, to Lace, this was little more than just a ride, or maybe than just another year of hanging out at the fair with me. And so, ever so slowly as the ride paused with us at its crest, I inched my hand closer, raising it over her own to hold together. My eye was caught by the light. Being so high up, I could see far across the flats of this province. And though night quickly descended upon this merry place, far off, flickering through the last stalks of grain in the distance, that sun burned. My mother's words echoed in my mind, but that cave was deep, and I was far within. Everything else within my line of sight grew darker, incomparable to the brilliant orange hue of that last sliver of sunlight. I blinked, and it scorched against my eyelid. There was an attraction to staring at it, not the kind I was riding, but a pull, a dangerous gravity. Breathing intensified, my heartbeat quickened, although no longer out of newfound love or excitement from the chainsaw. I'm 13. I don't believe in that stuff anymore. But I remembered my grandfather grabbing the bead-covered rifle, the panic in my mother's voice, the gunshot ringing out as we raced home, my mother telling me the stories to scare me to sleep later that night. Even if it was a superstition, it was still one that made me quake from its association with those past events. It's why, despite the doubt in my heart, I never consciously gazed at the sunset. Do not provoke the Sunchild, and yet I was captivated. I could not look away. The cage jolted us forward, and my hand collapsed back on the bar alone. I hadn't even noticed my ears drown out the noise of the carnival, but slowly sound returned as Lace tried to get my attention. Huh? I said, what do you think? Yeah, it was great. Lace nodded quietly and looked out at the other side of the cage. Good. After a moment, she whipped her head back in my direction, wearing a massive grin. So, what ride next? The next few hours, we would bolt from each ride as soon as it set us back upon the earth, and we would race for the next one, back and forth, to and fro. Small lines or long, hell, we hurried about, making the most of our time together. Sizzlers, quickly rotating pods, miniature roller coasters, fast-flying swings, giant wheels that pinned you to the edge with centrifugal force. We needed to refuel, but both of us had forgotten our money and couldn't purchase any of the wild confections that the carnival had offered. Asking Rob or Nancy for money would just feel rude, as Lace put it. And Tom? No. We both already knew the answer would be an obtuse no. That only left the classic, pestering the parent. We left the main attractions and headed for the adjoining zone. Here, the more church and community-oriented activities happened. Mrs. O'Leary, Miss Murphy's replacement, hosting arts and crafts for the kids too young to ride the rides. Pastor Daniels running bingo night for the old people. Farm hands putting together a big bonfire. Moms having a potluck lane to sell various home-cooked goods. And that's where my own mother was located. She was in the middle, handing off a bowl of her stew when I approached to pull on her sleeve. "Not this second, Piercy." She returned to her business with the family in front of her. "That'll be $5. "Damn, for that much?" The father covered his mouth, looking back at his wife quickly before quickly handing over the blue bill. It's quite the deal." "Hey, Mom," I said. She continued to ignore me. "Well, I do hope you like it. Made with fresh ingredients, right from Durham." "That's lovely," the mother exclaimed, gesturing to the four of them. "We've always heard about Durham's festivals, but never got the chance to come check them out until now." Mom? Pardon me, but I don't think you look familiar. Where are you all from?" My mother continued to smile and ignore me, despite my persistence. "We're from Meadow Lake," the dad answered, offering a handshake. "Peter Murray, this is my wife Diane, and our kids, Lily and Grant." Mom accepted it. "Marie Boyer, and it's a pleasure to have you all here. I hope you enjoy your time." She waved the family off as they left, and finally turned to me. "What is it, Percy?" Can we maybe have some money for treats?" My mom's face went flat in annoyance. It was quick, hidden even faster by a smile in front of Lace. But I caught it. With a sigh and a shake of her head, she opened up her wallet and passed me a purple bill. $10. "Now you share that with Lacey, all right?" Yeah. Lace snatched the bill from my hands. "Don't worry, Mrs. Boyer. I'll make sure of it." I raised my hands in a what-the-hell motion before facing Mom and giving her a quick kiss on the cheek. "Thanks, Mom. And don't forget about the ceremony later," she called out as Lace and I wove our way back through the crowds. At the concession stand, I was, as usual, indecisive. But when Lace gave me a nudge in the ribs as her ice cream began to melt, I stammered out the first thing I saw on the menu. Hot dog." Slathered in ketchup and mustard, I sucked the mixed condiments off the inside of my hand as we found a place to sit and eat. "So, what ride next?" Lace just kept looking off in one direction, unfazed by my question. I followed her line of sight to the Ferris wheel, specifically the upper compartments where the shadows of teenage couples were, well, a little too close. I shook my head to get rid of the thought, then lowered my hot dog down beside the table for... Oh, that's right. There was no awaiting Ma to share my snacks with this year, nor was there one the year before, when I'd done the same thing. I tucked away the sorrow I felt by shoving the rest of the hot dog into my gullet. Lace noticed my voracious gluttony and finally smiled at me. I tried to smile back, mustard leaking out of the corners of my mouth. "Ew, Piercy, that's a big wiener." The mood immediately plummeted as Tom approached with someone else. I shook my head and finished chewing. "Dude, shut up. We're in public." Tom grinned before gesturing to his friend. "You guys know Colby Anderson, right?" The glasses-wearing blonde-haired boy waved to us. "Hi." Lace nodded a bit. "Yeah, we shared a few classes before. What's up?" Not much. Trying to keep this one," he pointed at Tom, "from making a damn fool out of himself.
And also to invite you guys.
To what? I asked him. Colby smirked.
Robbie, Tom, myself, and a couple of other guys were prepping a campfire to tell some scary stories around, just on the edge of the woods over there. Tom said you two would be interested.
They are interested. You're right, guys? Tom beamed at us, popcorn shrapnel littering the gaps in his teeth. Lace and I glanced at one another, shrugged in unison, and responded, Sure. We followed the duo back across the fairgrounds, near where we'd just come from, and towards the tree line of the forest. There was an opening in the trees, and I could easily see Robbie chucking a log into the growing fire. Just checking over my shoulder, the backside of the carnival was also well within view. We could easily find our way back, but we wouldn't have any adults wandering over to patronize a group of kids having their own campfire. Robbie waved us over, taking a seat next to Nancy. She also gave a rolling finger wave before introducing the other two at the fire. A boy named Clyde and a girl, Molly, both of whom seemed to be around Nancy's age. Clyde was taking swigs from a flask. Whether it had actual alcohol in it, I couldn't say, but no one else was taking him up on it. Molly was pretty quiet, just poking at the fire with the stick. I sat on a log and Lace plopped down beside me, shoulder to shoulder. Tom took a seat next to Colby, and everybody chit-chatted for a bit before getting to the intended purpose of the gathering.
Well, this is quite the rabbit dance we've got going now, don't we?
Nancy glanced around, referencing an old children's story. I couldn't help letting out a small chuckle.
All right, now who wants to go first? Robbie said, taking the status of group leader.
Oh, I got one. Clyde started pointing and snapping his fingers at everyone. Do you all know about the strangle? A collective groan before various forms of affirmative backlash. Yes, yeah, no shit, Clyde. Everybody knows about the strangle. Yeah, okay, Clyde replied before a sly smile came over his face. But do you know about the strangle? He could barely finish before drunkenly laughing at his own joke.
Yes, Jesus, Clyde, Molly replied, tossing her stick into the fire. Monster in the wheat fields, or the monster is the fields, drags miscreant kids away to never be found again for fucking around in the farmers' lands. Let's just move on. Clyde pursed his lips and remained silent. Well, there was a more recent one that I've heard about, Colby offered innocently. The hound at the crossroads? Everyone went kinda silent. Tom gave his friend a look of disapproval, baring his clenched teeth and sucking in air while waving a flat hand back and forth by his neck. The universal nonverbal cue of, nah man, that ain't it. I could feel Lace's hand press down on mine as she sat a little closer. Colby seemed to notice her dismay and apologized immediately. Nancy sighed. Does anyone else have a spooky story that isn't traumatizing to one of us here, or the fucking strangle? I browned myself on the Sizzler last year. Well, that was pretty scary. Tom received an elbow to the ribs from Colby for that one. Robbie held his face in his hand. Guys? As everyone began talking over one another, Lily trying to share a legitimate story but getting cut off repeatedly, Tom continuing to joke about his shit pants, Clyde still attempting to tell the tale of the strangle. Amidst the droning, only one thought came to mind for me. I spoke plainly and clearly. The Sunchild. Everyone slowly quieted down. Nancy was the first to acknowledge my suggestion. Oh, that's an old one. I've heard that before. Robbie nodded. That's a good one to start with. Sunchild? Kyle looked about ready to go off on power-scaling tirade between the strangle and the Sunchild, but Lily slapped his arm and he started paying attention. Yeah, well, my mom told me about it when I was younger, I explained. I don't remember all the details. Well, why don't you share it the way your mom told you? To the best of your ability, Nancy said. The name seemed to have captivated all there, a strange title for those unfamiliar, and a new retelling of the myth for those that knew. I took a deep breath and began. So the way my mom told it, the Sunchild is one of those old gods, the kind the natives worshipped, something to do with good harvests, made the grass grow, the wheat stalks plentiful, game life thrived. But when they started fraternizing with French colonizers, the god became angry. See, apparently, it used to be very easy to call upon, or at least to talk to it. All you had to do was stare at the sun until it was burned into your eyelid. Like when you close your eyes, you see that sunspot, and then you could communicate with it with your head. But if you actually wanted to physically summon the Sunchild, there was only one time of day to do it. Sunset, Lace offered quietly. The rest of the group had gone silent. I nodded. The experience at the top of Chainsaw came to mind. If you watched the sunset and stared at the sun long enough as it touched the earth, then it would be able to walk out of the sun and onto the earth. Then it could stay the night before returning to the sun at dawn. But after the god was angered, now if you stare at the sunset, the Sunchild will come for you, crawling over the horizon, running at you on all fours like a hungry wolf. Endlessly, all night, the being will hunt you down for calling upon it. Even if you chase it off or somehow strike it down, it'll just crawl back over the horizon again and again until either the dawn comes or the one who summoned it is dead. Ew, that's creepy, Lily shuddered. Ha, I remember that one now, Tom smirked. That's just an old wives' tale parents would tell so that their stupid-ass kids don't burn their eyes out while staring at the sun all day. Robbie turned to his younger brother. Tommy, language. Tom stood up and began walking with straightened legs and arms outstretched. Help! Help, I can't see. I tried to summon the Sunchild and now I'm blind. Tommy, the damn fire! Robbie stood up and changed his brother's wobbling direction away from the flames. The boy just kept walking into the brush behind us. Oh, guys, look. I can see the location of buried treasure. I just have to follow the spot. Whoa! He tripped and fell, breaking the tension of the moment as we all laughed. I suddenly shivered as I felt something on my shoulder. My eyes glanced to the side. Lace's chin. Her lips were nearly pressed against my ear as she asked, Is that why your mother doesn't let you outside at dusk? Yeah. You know how seriously she takes all of that stuff. Lace nodded and backed off. Our shoulders were now separated, but the tips of her fingers still grazed my own hand. As I looked around at this merry band we had formed, I recalled my mother's response when I asked about the day I supposedly summoned the Sunchild. She tried to brush it off as nothing. When I brought up my grandpa's gunshot, she said he was chasing off a bear. But I remember her panic, her terror, and my own heart still felt ease and unfear of catching a glimpse of the sunset. So now I was left wondering, was there any truth to this myth? Chapter 3. Caffeinated acid poured down my throat as I took a swig from my energy drink and fingered the beads in my hand. I wondered about their origin, how old they really were. I brushed over one of the feathers tied into its rope. Where was the hawk this came from? Was it dead? For how long? Had Grandpa been the one to kill it? My head lifted at the sound of an engine rumble. Tom had arrived. I stayed sat where I was and waved as my friend got out of the passenger seat. Looking across his broad shoulders, I could see Robbie. He didn't wave back, only reaching over to slam the truck door shut before speeding back down the road. Yo. Tom made some attempt at a hand gesture as he walked past me towards the general store door. I turned around, staying on the step.
the hell's Robbie's issue with me? Tom paused, doorknob in hand, and looking off in the direction his brother had went. I don't know, he really hasn't been himself since Nancy dumped him. And that's my fault somehow? Tom just shrugged and walked inside. I sighed with annoyance, going back to inspecting the prayer rope. Or was rosary the more correct term? I'd heard that name before, but this didn't seem to fit the bill, especially since I'd never heard of a rosary you tie around the barrel of a gun. He came back out shortly with a drink of his own, taking large gulps that sent trickles of brown cola down his chin. Yeah, no man, I don't know what's up with him. Stopped participating in the church activities too. I could overhear my parents comparing him to Lace. I guess he's taking the whole thing pretty hard. I can't really blame him, I guess. They were together for what? I mean, how many years? Tom kept the mouth of his bottle at his lips. Even I can't remember when it all started now. It was too long ago. He took another sip, then nudged me. But, hey, that just means she's available now. Am I right? Ew. Dating a friend's ex is akin to incest. Whoa, all right there, Lacey. Any other sage wisdom you've got laying around? I bit my lip in response. It took Tom a second to recall. Oh, right. You're just going around pissing everybody off, aren't you? I shrugged a little before showing him the bead rope. She's the one who demanded I grab this. Is that all she said to you since then? I sighed and nodded, tucking the beads away. 2 years ago, Lace had started dropping hints on me at the festival, and I reciprocated to a degree. That was the start of this current friend group at the campfire. Last year, she was just as extra friendly, and I didn't really do a lot in response. She still seemed to have a good time, though, smiling as we parted ways for the night. But now, at 15? Wait, what do you mean everyone? 2 people ain't everyone. Robbie, Lacey, your mom, Tom said. Oh, yeah, I guess that's true. Well, she made quite a fuss when you wouldn't go to the festival yesterday. I scratched my own head and finished off the last swig of my own beverage. Yeah, man, I don't know. I've never really seen her freak out like that before. All I said that I was too old for that shit. Did you word it exactly that way? No, I mean, I literally just said I was too old for the fair. I didn't swear in front of her, and she still lost it. I mean, you did go to the carnival with us the opening day. I could see why she might have thought you were just lying. Yeah, but I feel like there was more behind it. I kicked a rock next to my foot. It was close to the anniversary of Dad ditching us, so... Tom glanced at his watch, then in both directions of the road. What the fuck is taking them so long? Huh? Excuse me? You literally just showed up, dude. Have some patience. I nudged him back, and we both grinned. Why, you in a rush to hook up with your former sister-in-law? Dude, no. I already live with 3 church-obsessed nut jobs. I'd rather blow my fucking brains out than date another one. And also because it's borderline incest. Tom nearly choked on his drink as he nodded. Yeah, man. Eventually, another truck pulled into the parking lot. Lace hopped out of the passenger side, and Nancy strutted around from the driver's seat, each approaching us. Tom and I stumbled to our feet and gave the usual pleasantries. Nancy was sweet as pie and waved delicately at us. Lace just let a baseball bat slide out of her lengthy sweater sleeve and smacked the cement parking lot. Did you bring it? I nodded and handed over the bead rope. She took it and set to work unwrapping them around the end of the bat. Hey, if you're so antsy about protection, why didn't you just ask for a gun? Tom asked. Then Percy here wouldn't have to worry about catching hell for messing with his grandpa's shit. Plus, a gun's probably better than... Yeah, Tom, that's a great idea, Lace snapped, not looking up from her work. The sarcasm was oozing out from between every word. Let's take a gun that doesn't belong to us so we could get pulled over by the fucking cops.
Lacey, behave. Nancy gestured towards her truck. Come on, boys. Hop in the back. Tom went bottoms up with the soda and finished it, chucking it into a nearby bin before lightly jogging over and climbing into the back of the truck. Lace said nothing and walked towards the back as well, still focused on the bat. I simply followed, lowering the gate and making my way in. Fragments of dry hay scratched my bare legs, some dangling off the edge of my shorts. Once I was situated, I turned around, but hesitated to offer Lace another hand. I didn't want to make things worse by assuming. With the three of us in place, Nancy leaned out of the window and swung her hand around like she had a lasso. Next stop, the endless horizon. The truck roared to life, and Tom and I grabbed the side as we bounced on to the main road. Lace ignored it and remained glued to the beads, inspecting the bat from every angle. She had run the rope down and around the shaft, either tying knots with itself or using multiple pieces of tape she'd been keeping on her. I just watched her handiwork, my gaze down and away to avoid eye contact. When she lifted her head, I turned away to face the evening wind blowing in my face. Tom, put your finger here, Lace ordered, struggling with a part of her retrofitting. Diesel filled my nostrils as we sat at a red light, but the air only grew colder as night approached. My eyes were transfixed on Mr. Mayer's ice cream parlor across the street. Even if we weren't busy, going there now with the three of us just wouldn't be the same. No, Tom, here. I could hear Tom's barely disguised snickering as he intentionally put his finger in the wrong place. The hot asphalt creeped its way up to join the burning fuel stench, and as Nancy drove us onward, my brain was taken back to the carnival. Sneaking around the back side of the attractions, being led by the hand between innumerable machines that powered the lights and hydraulics of that temporary wonderland. You know what? For fuck's sake, Tom, you're useless. Well, then get Piercy to do it, she sighed. Piercy, get over here, will you? I saw her turn to face me in that memory, her fingers still squeezing mine. Piercy, she repeated. I shook my head and crawled over. It was always a weird sensation moving around on a vehicle in motion. Yeah? Lace tilted a spot on the bat towards me where the rope was loose. Hold that down for a second. Sure. I did as asked and continued watching as she fixed the beads and feathers in place so it was taut against the wooden slugger. My eyes caught her lips, the second worst thing to focus on after the eyes. Retrospective guilt struck my heart like a stake as I remembered how they felt, soft with the firm force behind them. I remembered her hands on my shoulders, one sliding up to my neck as she continued kissing me behind the fairgrounds. I remember how I stood there, useless, not reciprocating. No force returned with my own mouth, no hands on her hips. I just stood there, like a fucking sack of meat. No passion, not an ounce of desire, not even disgust or rebuke. Nothing. I remembered the sting of the resulting slap, too. Hell, the only reason making eye contact would be worse in that moment was because I'd still see her sorrow, whether she still felt it or not. Those same sad eyes as she pulled away and looked at me before trying again. That pained gaze between her romantic elation and a furiosity filled by silent rejection. I'd take the stinging cheek any day over seeing those eyes again. Thanks. Lace finished her handiwork, and I quickly scuttled back to the opposite side of the truck beside Tom. That was the first interaction that we'd had in 3 days. Even Tom had to be the one to ask me to get the beads at the last minute. Yeah, no problem. I kept my head leaned back, watching the sky. Violet, pink, navy, and orange swirled together, speckles of starlight breaking through the gaps in the clouds. The road grew bumpier as we left the town and started passing the cornfields, where we'd disproven the murderous strangle a few weeks ago.
though Kobe did get a twisted ankle on some dead stalks, hence his absence on this trip. At the last intersection before the incline out of town, Lace and I both looked towards the tree. At its base, a small white marker for a lost friend. Jenkins' farm was noisy today, but he was not in the fields. The sounds seemed to be coming from the abattoir. I took the risk and gave Lace a quick singular pat on the shoulder as she dragged her forearm over her eyes. The truck bed began to tilt back and we all slid towards the gate as Nancy took us up the final hill. Tom squished me against the wall, to which I grumbled about, and he smirked. Lace smacked his leg, which finally prompted him to move, just as we leveled back out. My heart caught in my throat as Lace stood up and walked to the cabin of the truck, resting her hands on top and staring in the direction of the setting sun. Looks like we're right on time. Nancy slowed down, then began to U-turn and parked on the curb leading back into town. With the back now facing the plains, we were able to see that burning ball approaching the edge of existence. My focus was already pulled towards it, so it took Tom shoving me to get my attention. Huh? So what, we just watch? That's it? Tom said. Yeah. The myth says that it'll come out once the sun is touching the ground, so it can step off into our world. Nancy let out a fake laugh as she stood beside the truck. We went over those myths before confirmation. There's a lot to that one you got wrong, but you still got the ritual correct. Fancy that. I turned towards her and leaned over the side, seeing her smile. Yeah, what didn't I get right? She winked at me. Ask me again, when you're a little older. I sat back down and looked at the other two. They had both picked up the flirtatious tone as well, and we were all making perplexed faces at one another. I crossed my arms to ward off the cold and to comfort myself, returning my attention to the horizon. Wheat plains stretched on forever, swaying like 1,000 worshippers at the foot of a temple, all praying to the deliverer of their food source, the almighty sun. Tom pulled out his phone and set it up with the tripod that Nancy had brought along, aiming at the twilight. Lace kept lightly tapping the bat into her palm. I just kept my focus forward. It's funny how quickly the sun can set. Not that it's amazingly fast or anything, but just that it's observable by the human eye. You pay no mind to it during midday when it hangs right above you, but put it next to an immovable line such as the horizon, and you could count it down. You got the camera rolling? Nancy asked. Yeah, it's going, Tom replied. The sun descended further. Ripples of a mirage spread outwards. My breathing hitched, and my heart rate escalated. Was there truth to my mother's concerns over the Sunchild? What had my grandfather really been shooting at that night? Bear or beast? Would the beads on Lacey's bat actually do anything, if this all turned out to be real? Would my subconscious fears of a sunset be laid to rest? Here, at this dusk, all would be brought to the dying orange light. Touchdown. The first edge of the setting sun kissed the horizon. All of us stared it down, its blue visage becoming stamped into the backs of our eyelids should we have dared to blink. No words were exchanged for some time, so the only sounds were the rolling winds, chirping of evening insects, and quietly far in the distance behind us, the whimsical singing of the carnival. The sky grew darker. My entire line of sight became absorbed by the sun. Anything else in my peripheral vision fell to black. Only the sun and the plains it touched existed before my eyes. Okay, any minute now, Tom whispered. Lace responded promptly. Shh. More silence. The air grew colder, and the sun was no longer a full circle from our vantage point. I felt entranced, even as the others began to talk more. The mirage had intensified, but no sign of anything mythical. Do we know if there's like a degree of sunset it needs to come out at? Tom asked, checking on the phone recording. No. Comes when it comes. I could hear Nancy crack open the driver's side door, likely to sit on the edge. Out of the corner of my left eye, I saw Lace's grip tighten on the back. But my gaze stayed on the home star. Still nothing. Halfway down, the orange sky began to darken to indigo. More distant stars shone around their cousin. No Sunchild. Lower and lower it sank. It's not looking good. Maybe there's a specific date it has to be done? No, Tom, Nancy said, letting out a sigh. There was no specifics about the day of the year. If anything, it being the festival should increase those chances. Tom then turned towards me. Percy, you good? You've been hella quiet. Yeah, I'm alright. The last quarter now. What remained of the sunset was closer to a crescent moon than a doorway for some primordial creature. You know, I think we've proven it. The myth is just that. A myth. Call it? Tom's thumb hovered over the red button to stop the video. Lace stayed quiet. Nancy agreed, yawning. I was the deciding vote. Yeah, you know, we're done here. There's no Sunchild. And with a nod, he stopped the recording and began to lay the tripod back down. Lace slid down the side of the truck, letting out a long-held breath. I scratched my chest as the truck bounced to Nancy's entrance, feeling my heart calm. My troubled mind had been soothed. It was merely a story. But then a flicker. My eyes shot upwards, feeling the truck rumble beneath me. Against the last sliver of the evening's light, a faint beam stretched out like a cross, only for a moment before returning again, waving around like a car on the highway at night. At first, that's what I thought it was. But two things quickly killed that hope and began to instill dread deep within me. First, there was only one light, not the two stretching beams you'd see at night on the road from an approaching vehicle's headlights. And the second reason was that between the starbursts, there was no dark shape of a car behind it, but instead, it was the small, gangly shape of a figure sprinting at us. Guys, I muttered. Look! Tom turned and squinted. What? Do you see? Oh, shit. Lace immediately stood and walked towards the gate of the truck. A muffled shout came from the cabin. Hey, Lace, sit down. What's going on out there? Something's coming, Tom shouted. Something fast, I added. The shape had grown considerably in the few seconds of watching it run, and its sprint was unnatural, incorrect. Instead of the proper form of a regular jogger would take, this thing waved and wobbled about, as though it were injured but still running as fast as it possibly could. The truck door opened and slammed quickly as Nancy stepped out. She swore under her breath as well, then got out her phone and zoomed in on it. The pit of my stomach had begun to swallow in a relief I'd felt moments ago. Tom was also filming with his phone. Holy shit, guys, fuck, is that actually it? Yeah, I'm pretty sure, Nancy replied. Lace gazed between them before a scowl formed on her face. Nancy, get back in the fucking truck and drive. Hold on 1 second. Put your fucking phone away and get us out of here. Tom laughed wildly, a mix of fear and excitement in his voice as he kept his phone up. He had to grab it with both hands to stabilize the video, lest it be nothing but unwatchable shaky cam. Nancy let out a groan and got back inside, shifting gears. Tom and Lace dropped to one knee each, while I got myself up onto one. The figure had not paused or shown any sign of slowing, and now it was close enough to make it out. The Sunchild ran without care or cause, like watching a child who could barely walk try to perform track and field for the first time. It was a horrible, humanoid black shadow, wispy and swirling, limbs flailing in any and all directions it required to reach us faster, and in one lonely eye socket the light shone brightest. It wasn't turning on or off, nor was it blinking. The moments I could not see the starburst came from its head flopping around by its neck with no rhyme or reason, rolling to wherever its body weight deemed appropriate. I could hear the echoes of crunching bones and joints as it got closer and closer. We began to move and had to find our balance as the truck pulled away from the curb. The Sunchild was gaining on us. Lace rapidly hit the side of the truck. "Move! Move! Move!" And the sound of metal being scratched by one of the thing's fingers, just as Nancy accelerated out of its reach. Its forearms spun in circles at the elbows, desperate to get a hold of the truck. When the light did pass by my sight now, it was utterly blinding. "I can't believe this fucking thing is real," Tom shouted with his phone still in his hand. All I could do was continue to watch. The demon began to lose its footing, tripping over its own loose ankles. Eventually it fell forward, much to Tom's elation, only to immediately start scrambling down the road on all fours. "Oh my fuck. Percy, grab that tripod, it's gaining on us." "Nancy, you better drive faster," I howled, joining Lace at the truck bed gate. 40 meters, 20 meters, 10, and it leapt. Lace and I screamed and fell backwards as its claws latched themselves inside the gate, a freezing cold emanating from its body. Something went kathunk, and a second later the gate collapsed open. All three of us in the back scrambled to grab the sides of the truck as the Sunchild flailed an arm around to find purchase of a grip. The truck tilted and swerved, and I nearly thought I was going to fall out as Nancy seemingly tried to throw the monstrosity off the vehicle. Its claws sunk into the gap at the gate's hinge, and the beast let out a horrible screech. No mouth opened, but the noise did not cease as tendrils shot off its body in every direction for the duration of the screech. Once its discordant wailing was finished, I could make out its deep, scratchy wheezing on the wind, raking against my eardrums. It was hard to watch, not only because it was some eldritch being, but because the closeness of its eye beam was like having someone shove a flashlight directly against your eye sockets. Another arm flew forward, grabbing at the hard floor before finally resting on my ankle. Its grip singed the skin and ice, and I let out another howl, kicking and shouting and beating at the thing weakly with the tripod in one hand. Fear consumed me, and something inside my chest felt as though it were trying to leave, either to join this creature or to pull it into me. I'd never felt such a sensation of unwanted convergence in my life, and it frightened me to the core. "Get this shit off of me!" The whooshing sound of air being cut, followed by the cracking of skull. Lace had stood without a second thought, and with a heroic shout swung the prayer bead bat right into the side of the Sunchild's flopping head. The light truly dimmed for a moment before it screamed again. A thrust with the end of the bat, but it still didn't budge. So she brought it down again, grabbed the edge of the trunk for balance, and swung mightily once more. Gone. The moment the beads and feathers made contact in the correct spot, the Sunchild was just gone. It didn't flicker out of existence like a glitching computer monitor, nor was there an eruption of smoke or flame or glass. It was there, it got hit, and then it was simply not there. All of us were out of breath as the truck came to a halt, either from screaming or fighting. Tom had given up on filming entirely and simply clung to the truck's side for dear life. Lace collapsed beside me, dropping the bat between us.
You alright, Piercy?
Yeah.
Where did it get you?
She started crawling down my leg to take a look. It's just my ankle. It stings pretty bad, but I think I'm fine. She lifted the end of my pant leg. No visible wounds, only redness. Sighing in what I believe was relief, Lace pulled the gate back up and locked it into place. The cabin windows slid aside.
Are you all okay back there?
Nancy exclaimed.
Yeah, we're good, I think,
Tom replied, still trying to catch his breath. Nancy looked at us each nervously before nodding and turning back to the wheel.
We need to get moving.
Well, what are you talking about? I asked.
The myth. Don't you remember the goddamn story, Percy?
She shouted back at me, pushing the truck back into the gear. The story. You see, I shuddered and slowly turned back towards the horizon. A singular flailing light was running back towards us, only backlit by the remains of the crimson sky. Even if you chase it off, or somehow strike it down, it will just crawl back over the horizon again and again until either the dawn comes or the one who summoned it is dead.
Oh shit!
Tom scrambled to slide back from the gate. All three of us were pressed close together, watching the Sunchild race back after us. Its speed had only increased. The truck roared down the old country road, but still it gained. It was then that I saw it in her eyes. Lace gritted her teeth and stepped forward, bat in hand. When it leapt at the truck once more, the bat twisted in her hands to find the right angle before swinging with all of her might. One loud crack, and again it vanished into absolute nothing. Our surface slanted. The truck had hit the downhill. Lace slipped backwards and fell onto me, to both of our surprises and pain. She scooted back over, prepping the bat again.
At least if we keep driving, it's gonna take it longer for us to get back to... Ah!
Her scream naturally startled us, but we weren't expecting another scare so soon. Looking behind, I immediately understood. As the vehicle sped down the incline, with the top of the hill in view, I saw the Sunchild crawling back over the edge, over the horizon. Wherever ground touched sky, it would come, and with the darkness of night settling over Durum, it was about to become much harder to tell where the closest one was.
Go, go, go!
I squealed. Nancy revved the engine, and we bolted past Jenkins' farm and through downtown, past the businesses, past the carnival, past our homes, continuing into the countryside in the opposite direction. There was no question about going home or seeking our parents out. None of us wanted to put them at needless risk. One by one, in the gaps between attacks, we called home to tell them that we were staying at each other's houses for a sleepover. It took a few tries for Tom to gather himself enough to record a message that didn't have him sniffling or sobbing. A sea of stars flooded the sky that night. My heart was still racing every time it appeared. Fear that the bat would no longer work, that Lace would miss and be mauled to death. But still she stood and fought, even though I could see her quake after every swing just as I was. Sweat ran down my body and froze in the night air. My stomach was twisted into every imaginable knot, and I was forcing myself to swallow just to ease the pain in my tightened throat. On the tree line, it flashed and dove at us. Lace nearly lost the bat swinging upwards. On the other side of the road, Nancy started to freak as a singular headlight approached. Before long, it split into two, and the passing car was gone in an instant. A streetlight would trick us into thinking the Sunchild was coming from behind the top of a great oak, Earth still touching the sky, when it was actually in the middle of climbing over the side of the truck. And at one point, we exiled the solar aberration only to turn around and scream as it crawled over the line between the sky and the roof of the truck's cabin. After Lace smacked it down for the 10th time, we huddled around the cabin windows to discuss strategy. Okay. What do we do now? I asked. It won't stop coming for us, not ever, Tom murmured, choking up slightly. No, Nancy hit the high beams as she made a hard left turn. We just have to make it to morning. Then it'll go back into the sun, just like the myth says. Well, that's 8 fucking hours away, Nancy, Lace screamed, constantly checking back over her shoulder. How the hell are we supposed to outrun this thing for 8 fucking hours? The answer was obvious. We would drive. However, a tank of gas only carries you so far, and heading out into the long expanse at night meant not being picky. At the first sign of artificial lighting, we pulled over for a speedy refuel. Nancy threw us out of the truck as she hit the brakes. The fuel cap popped. Thomas hopped over the side and immediately got the nozzle. I couldn't quite stand yet, so Lace kept a lookout in all directions as Nancy ran inside the gas station. The gasoline poured vigorously, its only sound of accompaniment being the low growl of the truck and the taunting insects around us. They knew they were safe from the beast, whilst each of us were thrown into a panic at the sound of a branch snapping. Then 2. Then 4. The light waved through the tree line. Oh my God, it's here already. Lace tightened her grip and got into a batter stance. Tom started jostling the hose to get every last drop he could get before running it back to the pump. Go, get in. Nancy came sprinting out of the station, arms filled with cans. It's paid for. Everybody get in. Lacey threw the bat into the truck, landing on my lap, and climbed over the edge to fall flat on her back. She winced and moaned in pain. It broke through the tree line, its pace and sprint like that of a voracious dog. It was gunning to leap into the back of the truck, straight at me. Tom paused on the step, looked back, then at me, and he seemed to realize the same thing. In that shared moment, I caught that familiar glint in his eye, the one he always got just before a stupid idea. My heart caught in my throat too long to tell him otherwise. He spun around, facing toward the Sunchild, and spreading his massive body outwards to block the way. No! He screamed, equal parts fury and terror. Nancy hit the gas just as the monster collapsed into him. The two of us screamed his name as it ripped into him, strike after strike after strike, claws tearing and ripping straight into his heaving torso. Between flashes of light from his rattling head, I saw the red leak out from beneath him, and entrails dangling over the gas pump. Tom's screams of agony were drowned out by the scream of the engine, and I watched my best friend's chest cavity be emptied out by an angered god as it tried to climb inside of its corpse. When it couldn't fit, or when it had realized there were others it had lost, the starburst was aimed onto us again, and it gave chase. Lace and I could only sob, but somehow we had to get ready to defend. I got to my knees and I held out my hand. Give me the bat. Lace shook her head, hugging it tight. The Sunchild was growing close. God damn, give it to me, Lacey, she complied. The medallion. Aim with the medallion. I wiped my dribbling nose and inspected the bat. Only the red rear light on the cabin to aid me. I spotted it, held down between 2 lines of rope, an old metal signet, no larger than a quarter, worn down on all shapes except for the central Y shape across its face. My fingers squeezed the handle of the bat until they hurt, and for the first time in my life, I felt desire, one soul-burning want for no one else to die this night. The temperature then dropped, and the Sunchild hoisted itself into the back of the truck. With tear-stung eyes and gritted teeth, I aimed the bat and brought it upwards under the face. Wood and god bones splintered, and the Sunchild was gone yet again. I fell back wincing at my aching ankle from putting too much pressure onto it. Lace was still crying out, and feeling just as overwhelmed, I returned to that state too. Both of us letting out our tears, the tension bursting with the death of our friend. 3 cans flew out of the cabin window and into the back.
"Here, drink up, you 3. You need to stay awake," Nancy shouted, sipping her own energy drink. "I don't know what flavors I got. I just grabbed the first ones I saw." I choked on my own spit as salty rivers curled under my chin. I pulled on my hair and pressed the palms of my hands into my eye sockets. I slapped my head and cracked a can open, its contents spraying everywhere as I tried to get a dribble of it down. Anything I could do to try and lessen the pain of losing Tom. Lace just huddled up into a fetal position and let it out on her own. I completely broke down when Nancy finally caught on. Why are you 2 crying? Wait, where's Tom? Tom?
Somehow, we pushed onward. Lace and I found the strength to swing in alternation with one another, each time fueled by a rage that would never end. A rage to bash in the brains of the thing that took him away from us. But that anger also made us sloppy. I took a scratch across the arm. Lace lost a chunk of shoulder flesh. Blood blinded my right eye after a side swipe that caught me across the forehead. But every time we sent it back, waiting and dreading its inevitable return on the horizon. Any horizon. And by the time dawn neared, we were utterly exhausted. Blood and energy drinks formed a sludge that shifted across the floor of the truck. The first hints of morning pink could be seen as the Sunchild returned. By now, we'd lost count. All I knew was that it was my turn. I took the bat from Lace's hand, who was slumped into the corner of the truck. Nancy's driving had grown erratic, weaving left and right to stay in our lane. Gasping for air, my eyelids drooping, I knelt at the gate and waited for the leap. Every breath and exhale moved my entire frame. The rope was beginning to split in places, only maintaining its hold thanks to the tape. It still ran, but I stood firm. A shimmer. The first light of dawn cracked over the endless plains we had found ourselves in, an unknown distance away from Durum. As soon as that warmth touched us, I saw the chains fly out of that sun, translucent like glass, sparkling rose in the sunrise, spearing into the monstrosity. They seared the shadow's flesh, and in the next instant, the Sunchild was flung off the road and through the fields, dragging its fingers through the soil and the grass. The truck slowed. Nancy must have noticed it as well. The form shrank, the screeching grew faint, until finally it disappeared on the horizon for the final time. It didn't feel real, and none of us spoke. We just watched the sunrise, its delicate colors dancing across the sky and chasing away the stars. We'd survived. And shortly after that, I collapsed. The last sensation I could recall was the mix of bubbling beverage and body fluids sloshing against my face. Nancy took us all to the hospital. The Durum police were obviously interested in finding out what happened to Thomas Warrens and what we were all doing driving out in the country all night on our own. We all agreed on the same story. We had lied about sleeping over to get out into the country and stargaze when a pack of wolves had set themselves upon us. They got Tom while he was filling up the tank. Lace and I overemphasized the detail of foaming at their mouths. The gas station attendant vouched for our panicked state, even if he couldn't make anything out at the time, and also agreed that it had likely been a wild animal. My mother was just happy that I was alive, though Something in my gut told me she was willing to believe that we'd been messing with the occult. I never confirmed it with her, but the sunset always made me wary after that night. The funeral happened a week after the festival ended. It was a closed casket. I was asked to help carry it out, and it took everything I had not to weep while we lifted the body. Not only because Tom was dead, but because of how light it was. Thinking about that weight, I could only see his emptied chest in my mind. A man made hollow for the sake of his friends. At the end of August, Thomas Warrens was laid to rest. Robbie moved away to go to some fancy college. Nancy and I stayed the longest at the burial, thanking this one serious act in life to protect us. Lace, she never attended. Chapter 4. It was May when my grandfather died. The sky was gray when I exited the church. The air was wrong. It was going to rain later. Pastor Daniels was shaking each person's hand as they left. When he got to me, he offered his best, most comforting old man smile. The Lord be with you, Percy, in these difficult times. Thank you, Father, I said, giving a quick single shake before trying to continue on. Unfortunately, my mother had already placed her hand on my shoulder to drag me into another unwanted discussion. Yes, thank you for the Mass, Father, and thank you for coming today. I'm sure your grandfather would have appreciated it. I offered a disinterested, Mom then turned and jutted her chin, aiming for Lace and Kobe on the opposite side of the parking lot. Perhaps you could convince her to return. Mom, no. Oh, but Lacey used to be so good. Daniels joined in. It would be nice to have her active in the community again. Listen, it's really not my place to decide. I spun around and gave Mom a quick kiss on the cheek. I gotta go. Before she could say another word, I was hastily shuffling past senior citizens who found themselves beset by an unspeakable number of stairs, 5, and jogging over to the 2. Colby waved and pushed his glasses back up his nose, a persistent issue for him. I could barely make out where his brown leather jacket ended and the book in his hand began. Lace was leaning back against the passenger side of the car, blue tank top and jeans, with her sweater tied around her waist. I opened my mouth to speak, but Lace held up her palm. Car, now. She stood and got inside. Colby just shrugged at me, handed over the book, and we each followed. Colby started the vehicle up and we drove away, getting out ahead of all the families going out for Sunday brunch. All right, Lace. You want to tell me what this is all about? I chirped from the back seat, trying to untie the leather strap on Colby's book. We don't talk about it around them. You know that. She didn't even bother turning around to look at me. Do I, take a right here? Colby asked. You take a right when I say. Lace, you know what? Chill the fuck out, or you could do this on your own, I said. She didn't respond, only watching out the window. When the turn came up, she indicated so, and Colby took us there. I just shook my head, rubbed my sleepy eyes, and started skimming through the notes. Lace had become even colder over the last 4 years, but then again a lot had been unearthed in that time. It all began after Tom's funeral. As the remaining members of this mythos crew, Lace felt we had an obligation to uncover everything we could about what transpired during that relentless night. Considering the fact that the Sunchild was actually real, and that somehow it was so unheard of for such an innocuous summoning ritual, she became deeply suspicious of our town, which included the church she'd once lauded. If our elders knew of this and did nothing about it, she had said, I want nothing to do with them. Nancy naturally took some offense to that and immediately departed from the group. That left only Lace, Colby, and myself. While he hadn't been there that night, Colby was very good friends with Tom, and he wanted to know more about the truth behind his death as well. So we told him everything. We just laid it all out bare. When we were done, the boy wouldn't even dare look out at the library window, where the scarlet evening light poured in from. Instead, he set to burying his nose in books. And since then, 3 major compelling threads had come up in relation to the Sunchild. The first and mostly immediately noticeable, the Sunchild myth didn't exist, or rather, it didn't appear to exist beyond the confines of Durum. Any adults that were asked about it would give the same rant about it being a fairy tale to scare children, with the same details we already knew. We had to be careful about asking about this, and approached it slowly as to not arouse suspicion from the people that may, or may not, be keeping it a secret. When it came to records, however, nothing. Absolutely nothing. The internet was little help, but that's to be expected when trying to find a very specific local legend on the World Wide Web. But the library was surprisingly sparse as well. No Durum written books, no fairy tale stories for children warning of the Sunchild, not even old accounts of people encountering this thing throughout Durum's 300-year history. This motley little farming town had 3 centuries of history, and not once, not even once, had someone even claimed to have summoned the thing and wrote it down. Granted, Lace offered a quite morbid, albeit fair, explanation. Perhaps none of them survived the night to tell the tale. And then that tied into the second thread, the disappearances. You see, it is not unknown that there is a greatly disproportionate number of crimes and disappearances related to Indigenous people on our side of the country. Just see the Highway of Tears in British Columbia. Reports repeatedly state that police do not take these situations seriously or investigate thoroughly, when those reports even reach the public, as the media tends to ignore them as well. And here, in Durum, there was also a number of missing individuals over the course of its history, metis or otherwise. But it was not recorded in a noticeable way. In fact, most direct accounts of people missing before the 1970s had been scrubbed altogether. The only reason we knew they had happened at all was thanks to Colby. He began finding newspapers and journals that would refer to people who had vanished, but never anything directly about the victims. Very brief references, short quippings about how someone missed their son, a poem that was disguised plea for a wife to come home. Hell, Colby had even scoured the web, too. There was no mention of Jane Murphy moving elsewhere within Saskatchewan or beyond, nor getting a job with a new school or religious teaching system. And thus came the third thread. The police themselves. All of us, though initially thankful, later found it highly suspicious that they were so willing and so quick to accept the story of a rabid wolf attack with hardly any pressing. Hell, I tried passing it off as them just accepting the synchronized truth shared by 3 trauma-addled teenagers who just lost their friend. But when combined with the lack of knowledge concerning Durum's Sunchild and the strange history of people vanishing and being forgotten, it refused to sit well with the 3 of us. And this all looped back to Lace's disavowal of the church. The only people that passed down the myth were those affiliated with the church. For Lace and myself, our parents told us. For Nancy, she had previously admitted to learning the whole story just before going through confirmation, one of the church's 3 major rituals for up-and-coming believers. So with how religious the entire town was, sirens must have been ringing in her head that something about the Sunchild wasn't quite right. All of this leading to today. Colby pulled over to the curb and put the car into park. Well, good luck, you two. Don't get caught out in the rain. Thanks. Lace exited the car and slammed the door shut. He turned from the driver's seat and looked at me. Are you sure you want to risk your neck for her? I unbuckled my seatbelt and handed him back the notebook. Always. And if it all goes to shit, well then thanks so much, Colby. Stepping out into the street, a gust of wind blew my hair to one side. The air was getting even colder. I leaned against the driver's side window and I tapped on the glass. Don't hang around though. We don't need to drag you down with us if the cops do show up. Colby nodded and gave a thumbs up before driving off. I stepped on to the sidewalk beside Lace. You ready? I asked. She slung the worn baseball bat over her shoulder and strode towards the front steps of Jane Murphy's former home. Let's see why the Murph had to go. A smashed window later, we were wandering through the small, dusty house. No one had moved in since Murphy left town, and as we had seen from peeking through the windows prior, everything looked like it had been left where it was. No car was in the driveway, but we'd already had first-hand experience with what had happened to that thing. Pages and books were sprawled out across the coffee table. Undried dishes sat in the rack, having long since completed their own job. A stink of rotten food emanated from the cracks in the fridge's seal, but we both agreed to save opening that for last. If there was a head in there or something, best to put off the impending trauma as long as possible. I pressed my hand to my mouth and yawned widely, only to receive a punch in the shoulder. I whipped my head towards Lace, who pressed a finger to her lips. What? There's no one here, I replied at a normal volume, albeit a tad annoyed. Another yawn escaped my lips. Lace sighed, looked at the floor, and then seemed that she wanted to act like an actual friend for a change. You're tired? Yeah, a bit. I started checking some cupboards. Cobweb-ridden teacups filled every inch. Couldn't sleep, or Lace did the same? Actually no. I wasn't really worried about this. What a surprise. I could sense the sarcasm in her reply. It was, bad dreams. Oh? When I didn't continue, Lace prompted me. Do you remember what they were about? Yeah, vaguely, I guess. I mostly remember running. Endlessly running through the woods. I failed to mention the part about flying across the gas station parking lot and tearing Thomas to shreds. I left out any mention of me trying to purge the aching, painful fire in my chest and force it into his. Ribs being splintered and broken, blood splurting across my face with each break, turning his organs into a mush akin to runny oatmeal. And I would never, ever admit that this had not been the first time that I'd had this dream. We continued the search. There were plenty of sun-bleached paper crafts from her students on the wall, each depicting the beauty of nature, but nothing was suspect. I turned on my phone's flashlight and split up from Lace to continue searching the premises. In the living room, stacks of newspapers, our church's hymn books and scriptures, a vinyl player, and an impressive collection of said vinyls. Pretty bog standard as far as Sunday school teachers went. My heart sank upon seeing the empty bottles scattered beside the feet of chairs and underneath the couch. Percy, up here. I hurried as quickly as I could to the carpeted stairs, feeling a momentary pang of guilt for not taking my shoes off first. Lace was waiting for me in the bedroom. Clothes were strewn about the room, and even more bottles sat around her night table. She pointed the end of the bat towards the closet door opposite of the bed. Locked. And what do you... I could barely get out the words before she started beating on it with the bat. I flailed my arms upwards in surprise, leaping backwards before trying to remind her that the cops being called on us would be a bad thing. The whole doorknob collapsed, plate and handle falling to the floor with a clunk. Lace stuck her fingers in the leftover hole and pulled the door open. It took me joining in to fully get it open, as the wood was swollen and dragged against the floorboards. When my light finally met the closet's contents, I was puzzled. I wasn't shocked, I wasn't horrified, I was just simply curious. It was a shrine, yes, but that wasn't the most surprising part. Normally in movies, when you saw secret compartments or rooms in the movies, it was always for witchcraft or Satanism, but here, in Jane Murphy's shrine, there was no pentagram or strange herbs, but instead, on a small cloth table, she had pictures of a bearded man, many small used candles, and a cross with that same man, presumably, nailed to it in the back. My brows furrowed. Isn't this Jesus? What group worships him? The Christians, dumbass, Lace replied, skimming through a Bible she had acquired. I held my hands up, feigning innocence. Okay, sorry for asking. It's not like anyone around here worships him. Lace closed her eyes and nodded hesitantly. Yeah, okay, you're right. She then tapped the shrine with her bat. But Murphy clearly did. I kneeled down to check underneath the table. So why hide the fact you're part of the biggest religious group in the world, right? I looked up at Lace and she nodded before gazing around the room. Why did she think this needed to be kept under lock and key? Like, who cares? Well, maybe the church doesn't view other faiths kindly, considering she was teaching their lessons. Nothing was beneath the table. I stood back up and dusted off my knees. So what, like Pastor Daniels came in with a hacksaw and... I mimicked the motion of stabbing with the knife in the air. Lace looked around the room. I haven't seen any bloodstains, but I wouldn't put it past the police to cover that up too. Her gaze turned toward the bedside lamp, and a moment later it met the end of her bat, followed by the floor. And you're telling me to stay quiet? I muttered, inspecting the shrine again. Jostling the table around, I felt something move beneath and on the side. Lifting the cloth higher revealed a drawer. Hey, we might have something here. I began yanking on the small knob, but it was too locked. Lace moved forward, pressing her hand against my chest. Stand aside. Winding up once more, she brought the bat down and then upwards, striking the frame around the drawer. I could hear wood splinter, but whether it was the table or the bat, I couldn't tell. Then she brought the bat down onto the shrine, shattering the pictures and sending everything to the floor in a ruckus. Again, another hit underneath, and the table tilted. A final smack underneath broke the wood, and the drawer collapsed to the mess below. A journal awaited Lace's hand. She instantly snatched it up and began perusing its contents. Daily entries. She was suspicious of the church, too. For a moment, I thought I caught a twinkle in Lace's eyes. There was no mistaking that sound. Lace slammed the journal shut and headed further down the upstairs hall, finding the bathroom. She struggled to get the window open, so I stepped in and lifted beside her. It flew upwards with a satisfying thunk. Lace stuck her head out and without a word began exiting legs first. Once the only thing I could see were her hands, she finally whispered, "Plywood below. Be careful." My ears picked up police codes and walkie-talkies beeping around the front door. There really was no other option. I followed suit and began climbing out backwards. Looking down, I saw what Lacey had meant. There was a pile of planks stacked against the house, only separated from my feet by roughly a 2-foot gap. I lowered myself as far as I could go, feeling the feeling of raindrops hitting my fingers before releasing my grip. I landed on the planks a little louder than intended, and there was an immediate response from the front of the house. "Sounds like someone's going out the back. I'm going to investigate. Over." Lace grabbed the scruff of my jacket and dragged me across the yard towards the dilapidated fence. We squeezed quickly through the hole just as the officer ordered us to announce ourselves, though I doubt she had spotted us. Lace then put a hand on my shoulder before giving me the next plan. "Split up. We'll talk later." Without a chance to refute, she ran off to the left, leaving me to go right, climbing around through people's backyards, trying to stay in the greenery of bushes and trees, moving faster past houses with noticeable lights on. The rain started to come down, so at least I had a reason for keeping my hood up other than hiding my face. I tried to make my way back down the sidewalk, but hearing the approach of slow rolling tires and seeing red and blue lights flashing over houses forced me back. I dove into another bush, scratching my face up in the process, but I was hidden from the street. And that's when I heard a door crack open from behind me. Ah, shit. "Percy? Percy, is that you?" I turned to the familiar voice, and I saw Nancy leaning out onto her porch. She was still dressed in her Sunday best, her makeup done, and the same long flowing dress I'd been admiring during the church service. Her hair was tied up into a smooth ponytail, and the only sign that she was actually lounging around her house was the lack of shoes and socks. "Oh, hey." She crossed her arms and leaned against the doorway. "Come on in. Get out of the rain a bit." Seeing it would be the best hiding place for the time being, I strode up to the front steps and I thanked her before following inside. "I didn't know you lived here. I'm sorry about the bush." Don't worry about it." She moved behind me to help me take my coat off, slinging it over her forearm. "Here, have a seat. You'll be safe from cops in here." She gestured to the living room, where a TV was quietly playing the film, Grossi Point Blank. I scrunched up my face, feeling an urge to start running. "Why do you think they're after me?" "It's not just you. I'm sure Lacey was the one to drag you into something, hence the sneaking around." "Am I wrong?" I sighed and sunk into her couch, arms spread across the back. "No, you're not. We were, Nancy laughed and put my coat back on the rack before joining me on the opposite end of the couch. "There's no need to incriminate yourself in front of me. I mean, seriously, ever since that night, that girl's been messed up in the head." She reached back and pulled her hair tie out, undoing the ponytail and letting her long black locks fall gracefully down her exposed shoulders. "I mean, we're all kind of we were all traumatized by it." I didn't want to upset her with unsuitable language. I thought I caught a glimpse of a smile as she noticed the catch. "Did you want something to drink?" Nah, that's all right, thanks." Okay. Well, I'm gonna grab something for myself." Nancy got up and rounded the corner. I fiddled with my fingers, weighing whether or not to ask about the things that had related to her leaving the friend group. When I heard the fridge door close, but before she had re-entered the living room, I decided to go for it. "Hey, if you knew the Sunchild was real back then, why did you still take us out there?" Nancy slowed her return to the couch with a sip from her glass, before sitting sideways on her legs and tilting the glass in a circular motion to stir the drink. "Well, I didn't know it was real, I just knew the story at the time." "Yeah, you said you knew the whole story. What do you know that I didn't?" She took another sip and shook her head. "I was just teasing with you then. You knew it pretty well." "So, what was that? Just a flirt?" She winked and flicked her finger upwards. "Bingo." "Okay, but even then, it was a weird flirt. I mean, everybody noticed it." Nancy shrugged and propped her head up with an elbow embedded in the couch's back. "So?" I could feel blood rushing to my cheeks and elsewhere. I pressed further to take my mind off of that direction of thinking. Even if you didn't know that thing was real, why risk the chance that it was? Nancy's eyes drifted towards the television. I guess I wanted to believe that it would be a beautiful thing. I wanted to believe that of our myriad of local tales, something in this town existed, that it would recognize our faith in it and be kind. Otherwise, what has been the point of believing all these years? Yeah, well, guess I can't really argue there. Her gaze flew back at me. Hey, don't act like I didn't care about Tom. At least I bothered to show up to the funeral. She doesn't like church anymore. They didn't do anything. Well, that's kind of like the whole point, Nance. We both stayed quiet and just watched the movie for a while. The rain pitter-pattered against the glass, meeting the audio level of the movie, but neither of us moved to turn it up so we could hear better, nor did we turn it off and just speak. The two of us simply sat there in an awkward silence, sharing the moment, although Nancy did seem to try and non-verbally break the quiet between us. Her feet slid out further and sat beside my thigh, grazing it ever so slightly but constantly. I pretended not to notice. When the action in the movie lulled, she decided to speak once more. You know, you never gave me an answer. What? I gave her a confused look. She rolled her body towards me. You never gave a response to my flirting. You just stayed silent that day. I adjusted my sitting position. 'Cause we were hanging out as a group, Nancy. Could have given me an answer afterwards. She leaned forward, shifting across the couch towards me. One of her shoulder straps began to slip, and the gap at her chest grew wider. It was hard coping with that situation alone. I averted my eyes, staring at the TV, but my body turned to lie back against the couch's arm. Nancy, I know how the boys watch me, but I've only ever watched one in return. She crawled up my body, hands on the cushion by my waist. She brought her arm up and out of the strap entirely, letting the left side of the dress begin to droop. I felt the smooth palm of her head turn my face so that her sultry gaze could meet my awkward one. Guess I just had to wait for the right opportunity. My heart began to thud, and it reverberated through her as she pressed her body up to mine. Her breasts squished into my pectorals, and I was unable to keep my pants from tenting. Nancy looked downwards and grinned, moving her face up to mine. Her lips dragged across my cheek and back until they met my ear, and I jumped as tender fingers waved over the front of my pants. Not even Robbie got this, she whispered, her tongue nearly licking the curvature of my ear canal. I shut my eyes and turned my head away. Deep within, she had intentionally evoked some kind of primordial desire. To own, to have something or someone for the first time. My body surged with lust, but my conscious mind was uncertain. I mean, didn't I want this? Hadn't I and every other teenage boy in Durham lusted for Nancy LeBlanc? This is what we all wanted, and yet, in this moment... The rest unfolded quickly. Her dress came down to only cover her stomach. Her dress came down to only cover her stomach, and my own palm was led to the softness of her chest. Nancy's tongue found its way into my mouth. I barely moved. Nancy called it a service as she rolled her hips and bounced upon my naked waist, doing all the work. There was physical pleasure, and it overwhelmed my mental capacities. I didn't have any other women on my mind, but something just felt off about this. Her moans and my grunts were drowned out by the rattling of shutters and panging of raindrops outside. Eventually, my own hips rocked in rhythm with hers out of pure carnal instinct. Nancy seemed elated and continued slamming her body into my own. As I stayed quiet, she constantly passed quiet affirmations and pleas into my ears, leading towards a final permission being given. We both finished. Nancy collapsed into me, trying to match our heavy breathing. It didn't. Then, slowly, she lifted herself up and off of me, pulling the straps of her dress back up. "Don't worry about a thing, Percy," she huffed tenderly with a smile. "But I'm afraid I'm going to have to kick you out now. Mom and Dad will be home from the farmer market any minute now." I nodded without a word and pulled up my pants, then speed-walked towards my coat and slung it on. It was completely storming outside, but I didn't care. I frantically tried to zip myself up, but kept getting caught. I could feel a crying fit beginning to swell in my chest. "Percy?" I looked over my shoulder to see Nancy still smiling with rosy cheeks, her hands crossed politely in front of her. "Thank you." I gave up on the zipper, slipped out the front door and into the storm. My eyes stayed low as rain pelted my coat without cease. "Percy?" I nearly thought I was experiencing deja vu for a moment, but looking up the concrete pathway, I saw Lace standing on the sidewalk, still holding Jane Murphy's diary. That look in her eyes matched exactly with the one Robbie had given me on that relentless night. Nervous fear bubbling behind a mask of composure. "What are you doing here?" she asked. I still felt like a frog was stuck in my throat, but I opened my mouth to try and let any sound out. Nothing came out. Instead, I just pointed to the book. She looked down at it, keeping it close. "I was just coming by to show Nancy, to convince her to help us. Jane learned everything, Percy. She knew all about..." Lace gave me another look over. "Why were you just coming out of her house?" I still couldn't answer. Lace looked out the house, then back to me. The bubbling in the eyes changed from fear to anger in a heartbeat. And before I could even run, she stomped forward and smacked me. I stumbled backwards as her fist collided with my head, eventually tripping into a puddle on the concrete. I cried out in pain, then watched with horror as Lace continued her approach. "You fucking asshole!" She kneeled down and grabbed me by the collar before raising the journal high and bringing it down onto the bridge of my nose. I could feel blood flow out and join the rivers of pain and tears running down my face. Another smash to the right cheek, then another to the left, and a shot to the ribs. I gave up on trying to sit up and just laid back, only 2 words escaping my closed throat. "Lacey, please." "I lost my fucking dog because of you." A slap to the face followed. "And then what? My longest lasting friend who survived that awful day with me can't even bother to reciprocate? Can't even just say no? Years of being your friend, and you still can't make a goddamn decision for yourself." She shoved my chest with both hands and sat just below the ribcage, forcing the air out of me. "You're always just standing there with that stupid, useless fucking expression on your face." I felt a rib crack upon receiving another hit, and I gasped for air. "And now what?" Lacey lowered her face, ensuring our eyes met so I could see her fury. "Now I catch you walking out of that witch's house. You won't even show a sliver of affection to me after everything we've been through together, but you'll fuck her." She clenched her own teeth, angry spit forming at the seam. "You've known. All this time, you've known, haven't you?" She leaned back and let the rain fall onto her face as she sobbed, then stood up off of me. 8 years. 8 fucking years," she whispered. "You didn't have to love me back. I just needed you to acknowledge that I did, and you couldn't even manage that." I tried to call out to her again, but she was already picking the journals up off the ground and walking away. The last words I could make out over the rolling thunder were, "Goodbye, Percy." I just lay there, too dizzy to stand, wishing the sky would drown me in its rain, wishing that the earth would swallow me whole and crunch my bones to dust, wishing the LeBlancs came home this instant and ran me over. Anything, just to not have to live in this moment for a second longer. Tears and blood continued to flow freely, down my skin and clothes and into the drain on the street. It hurt more knowing that, in a way, that Lace was right. I'd never aspired to anything. I never gave a preference. I always followed her around as faithfully as Dougland had. My indecisive nature had led to this, regardless of whether the beating was at all warranted or deserved. Even that thought was middling. I couldn't even decide for myself whether I deserved to have the shit kicked out of me or not. But that wasn't my deepest concern, no. What really bothered me was the feeling within that I recognized both experiences with those women. I didn't desire Nancy sexually. I didn't want Lacey romantically. But somewhere buried within my soul, I drew pleasure from both encounters. A sick, conceited pleasure that now longed to be fed after Lace severed all ties with me. I'd never noticed it until that day, and it disturbed me that such a feeling existed within me. I never wanted Lace. Well, not in the way that she wanted me. I had simply enjoyed being wanted by her. Quite honestly, it disgusted me. Chapter 5. It was the final day of the festival. There was no place for me on those fairgrounds, no campfire to share with friends. Lacey had left town entirely and nobody knew where she went. Colby had vanished and the police couldn't make the concern over that one disappear. So the search was still ongoing. Nancy had stayed true to her word. I didn't hear a thing from her, so I didn't feel obliged to worry over her status. Mom had long given up on trying to make me an engaged member of the church. So there I laid in my bed, back turned to the window, and as such the world. This life of indecision, this is where it had led me to. No way forward, no purpose to existence. I sunk into the pillow, tears leaking out at random intervals when my heart felt heavy. All I could do was wait for whoever or whatever was behind the disappearances to come and sweep me up too for meddling around. I welcomed oblivion. And that's when my phone buzzed. She hadn't messaged me since that day, about 3 months ago, and now out of the blue, Lacey McIntyre had sent me full-on paragraphs of text messages. I was hesitant to read it, remembering the ache in my ribs, but there were no other paths forward for myself. The only thing I was good at was following the directions of another. I sat up in my bed and opened the message. I need to apologize, not just for hitting you, but for my behavior over the years. It's not your fault you're the way you are, and I should have been better about it. So, I'm sorry. I am sorry, Percy. I realized on my travels that you never knew the truth. I learned it that day from Jane Murphy's diary. But you never had the chance to, and so I figured, fuck it. One last story for you to chase down. The truth you deserve, and a truth so unbelievable you must learn it for yourself. If you want nothing to do with this, well, that's fine too. Just delete my number, be rid of me for good, and live the best life that you can. Colby's gone missing. You know this already, but I know what happened, not just to him, but to everyone. 300 years of missing persons, and it's always been the same answer. I'm already back in town and confirmed it for myself last night. If you want the truth, you won't even have to see me, by the way. Then go to where this all began. You'll know who to go after once you figure it out. And should you confront them, above all else, please remember who you are. I was the arrow, and Lace was the archer. She was trying to aim me straight down the throat of this conspiracy. using me to reach her own ends in this crusade against the Church of Durum. The girl who loved me, the girl who beat me, the girl who had survived the Sunchild's wrath with me, was now asking me to find the truth that I was owed. So how could I say no? The sky was beginning to yellow as I reached Douglin's resting place. I climbed the fence and knelt beside his grave, patting the soil and gazing at the marker. It was a simple white Y shape, the same that existed in a much larger fashion in our church. Where Christians had the cross, we had the Y. The same shape on the medallion that had banished the Sunchild. I stood and I looked around. There were no cars coming to or fro, as was expected. Most people would have gone to the festival by now, and so I hurried along the fence, crossing Farmer Jenkins' wide fields of corn and cabbage towards the buildings on his property. Besides the bleating of animals, there wasn't much sound. No machinery, no car engines, though his truck was parked out front. No TV or radio blaring from the kitchen of his farmhouse. It was rather quiet. The barn door was already ajar, so I crept up and took a peek inside. I half expected to see Kobe on the ground, buck naked and hog-tied to prevent his escape, or perhaps lines of bodies all kept under burlap sheets. But there was nothing untoward inside, just animals mooing and sleeping and eating. I figured the farmhouse would be the riskiest spot to break into, so it was immediately reserved for last. The garage was locked, but a peek through the window yielded nothing of note. Simply tools stacked on unused equipment. That left the abattoir. The stone on the floor was stained brown over the years of slaughter. A runoff trough ran halfway the room's length. Headless pig and cow carcasses hanging in parallel from lines of hooks. The blood ran slow, but still ran. They had died recently. They must have been the lives that supplied the festival's barbecue cookout. The air stunk of death and manure. But it was the machine at the far end of the room that drew my gaze. Seeing a set of wide metal stairs next to it, I trotted up to get a better look at it. The sharp teeth of the great meat grinder spiraled into the abyss at its center. Its maw frightened me terribly, but it was a silent giant. Fragments of beef or pork were left over on the white conveyor belt. Flies gathered to scavenge said flesh for their own. Half-filled sacks of mulch leaned on the machine for support, next to a tower of empty used bags. And shoved behind them, between the machine's base and the wall of the abattoir, I spotted something else. Climbing back down, I squeezed myself into the tight gap and just barely wrapped my fingers around the handle on its side. Slowly, yank after yank, the massive chest slid out, leaving a trail across the dusty floor. The lock on its face was firm, but it had one clear disadvantage: being a lock on a farm. I grabbed the sledgehammer leaning against the wall, its head rusty from beating in other heads, and brought it down on the lock and face. The chest barely bounced, but the metal latch squeaked. I did it again, and again and again, smashing the blunt tool against that weakening seal. When enough of the metal had peeled from the wood, I ditched the hammer and reached for a nearby sickle to pry the rest off. The chest lid popped open without a hitch after that, and looking inside, I was not surprised by the contents, but I still felt like shit all the same.
Hello? Is there somebody in there? Oh, Percy, my boy.
Farmer Jenkins was standing by the doorway.
Why or whatever are you doing all the way the hell out here? Well, I nearly thought the strangle had wandered in here, boy. Shouldn't you be out enjoying the festival?
I stood up and turned around, lifting Colby's journal out from the mess of bloodied clothing while keeping the sickle in my other hand. Jenkins looked at me, then the book, and then back to me.
Well, yes, I
I do like to do some writing in my spare." "No one really moves away from Durum," I replied coldly. "Do they, Jenkins?" The sparkle in his cataract-ridden eyes faded, realizing he wasn't speaking to a 9-year-old me. He sucked his dentures back into his mouth and refused to answer. He didn't need to. I could feel the anger swelling within my chest. I threw the leather journal to the floor and strode up to the old man, grabbing him by the collar of his plaid long sleeve and getting in his face. The edge of the sickle scraped against his peach fuzz. I had so many frustrating questions that wanted to burst out, but I couldn't pick the right one. As my throat choked with rage, I managed to squeeze out a single word that encompassed everything my brain wanted to know. "Why?" Jenkins' eyes hardened just a little, like a near-robotic response, and he finally responded. "Well, son, we don't answer that." I grit my teeth and I shoved him back hard enough to slam him into the conveyor belt. As Jenkins winced and wheezed in pain, I stormed out of the abattoir and back down the road. The simple use of "we" had confirmed everything Lace theorized for years. The police wouldn't do anything, even if I tried. Lace had purposely kept her distance, either out of respect or so I could learn this horrible truth myself. Quite honestly, it was likely both. And Jenkins was so brainwashed, he didn't show a crack of remorse for feeding people into a giant mulch maker. But it was the final day of the festival, which meant I knew where I could get answers. I knew where the right people would be gathered, just as they did every year. The same dinner that concluded every festival before this, where my mother brought her famous stew, made from vegetables grown in the ground, fertilized by the flesh of human beings. The church's community hall awaited, the place where all of Durham's fictions and myths were taught during Sunday classes. I tightened my grip on the sickle, and I marched towards revelation. As my shoes clicked down the waxy floors, I could hear murmurings coming from the presentation center. The double doors were closed, but the words still leaked out. "Failed to engage him." It was Pastor Daniels. "I know, Father," my mother spoke. "At this rate, never return. That McIntyre's to blame." A voice I couldn't place started to roar above the others. "Prophesized, we must have." Another unfamiliar voice. I pushed my way through the double doors. It wasn't some kind of occult meeting with people wearing strange red robes or chanting in Latin. Hell, they were all dressed plainly like ordinary people putting together a community dinner. The only candles here were ornaments for the feasting table, which stretched out perpendicular to me on the other side of the room. Luscious greens and cooked meats were scattered between desserts and pitchers, and behind them all, the stage, with a large white Y standing against the orange brick wall. Everybody was standing across the table from me, and each turned in my direction. Pastor Daniels was in the middle of the group, and his face grew elated as he noticed me. Hobbling as quick as he could, he brushed past everyone on the left side. My mother, Nancy, and her parents, Mr. Mayers, Mrs. O'Leary, one of the local police officers, and headed straight for me. "Oh, the harvest comes. You've finally joined us." His gaze then dropped to the sickle, and a smile faltered ever so slightly. Would you like something to eat?" I raised the blade towards him. "What I would like is for you all to tell me what the fuck is going on in Durum. What has been going on here? Now!" The pastor looked confused and turned back towards the others. "He is a little early. Ixnay on the celebrations, everyone." "No, wait," O'Leary wagged a finger excitedly. "You said intervals of 5, correct?"
Yes, that's what he told us, Daniels concurred. O'Leary turned toward my mother next. Marie, born in May, yes? My mother nodded, then gasped at whatever realization had hit her. The Sunday school admin then opened her arms wide. Then if the timing begins at the moment of conception, he would be 20 today. Everybody gasped and started buzzing. Pastor Daniels turned back to me, even more excited than before. Today's the day. The harvest comes. The droning of the congregation made my blood boil. I pushed the blade closer to Daniels. What is today? Why does it matter that I'm here? Daniel's face flickered back to one of confusion. You returned to us, my lord. My lips parted, but no sound could come out. Everyone grew quiet, and Pastor Daniels pushed the blade of the sickle down as he said, You, Syncreacolts, have returned to us on your own volition. My heart began pounding out of control. I blinked a few times, seeing my vision begin to blur. I tried to swallow, but my esophagus was constricted with pain and befuddlement. What? What the hell? Daniels came closer and slowly placed his hands on my back to walk me towards the table. Well, it's only fair that you are caught off guard. Well, your memories are still holding that Sunchild in place after all. The same word pulled and dripped from my quaking lips once again, for it was all I could muster. What? Our Lord of the 5 Harvests. You were brought here centuries ago, just as your faithful have done for eons, seeking new lands to claim bounty and tribute from. A land of golden fields, just as you promised us. Daniels began running his hand up and down my back gently as he whispered in my ear. Well, our ancestors showed the natives your existence, and we claim this land as tribute for you. All who reside in Durum offer tribute one way or another. Our Lord does love his tributes, Nancy smiled, running a hand below her growing belly bump. Tom, Robbie, Colby, Murphy. As my eyes grew teary, I recalled a dream. The wheat fields scattered to the edges of the earth, watching each and every individual stalk grow, be harvested, and die. It was a pleasant, peaceful dream at the time, but now it frightened me. But you, oh Lord, O'Leary continued, your godly appetite was not to be satisfied by such simple human offerings. Wheat, grass, onions, admiration, and worship in your name. It was not enough. And in your unending genius you hatched a plan, one that we, your seeds, are enacting the end of at this very moment. The pastor stopped me and came around in front, kneeling and holding my hand as though we were ready to propose. In this town of loyal subjects, you still wanted more. Just one more follower. No. And so your father made love to me, my mother offered, causing bile to fly into my mouth. On the 5th night of the 5th month, as you proclaimed, and the moment that life had been planted in my womb, you sealed away that child's soul, along with the majority of your essence, leaving just enough for the crops to always be bountiful and the cattle strong, that you might still receive tribute in all the other fashions. You exercised your own fetus? No, you did, my lord. The pastor slowly stood and held me by the cheeks. My tears began to wet his palms. Well, you let enough of yourself to linger on, to still walk amongst us and aid us, while the rest of your might and your will tethered that worthless soul to the dawn and dusk. I'm not Percy. I'm not a god. I can't be. What then?
Well, every festival, every myth and lesson, Mr. Mayers chimed in, all to love yourself a little better. But why? Why would you, or I guess why would I, do such a horrible thing? My body shook as I forced the question out. We do not answer that question, my lord. As was written, the impossible question becomes the subject of praise. That reply from Daniels was the most dignified and soulless response he had given. The table joined in prayer. I was sobbing by now, collapsing onto my knees. Daniel held his gentle grasp upon my face. We were beginning to worry that we had failed you, that you would never come to love yourself, your own glory, without knowing yourself, that our tales had not made you a believer. But here you are. The vessel came home to celebrate the harvests. O mighty Sycoracolytes, you have performed the most fantastic of trickeries, fooling your blank self into a disciple. Daniels turned and shouted, prompting an applause from the other zealots in the room. My hands felt weak against the sickle's handle, but it still clung to my fingertips. It could have been any child of Durum, Percy, Mom shouted amongst the prayers and cheering. Any child that bore the law of 5 in their name. But it was you, my only son, and I've never been more proud of anything in my life. The chance to raise my own King of Kings. So the Sunchild, I whispered. I could feel the ache in my body where a human soul was lacking and a voracious hunger was stirring. It was just a story for you, my lord, Nancy's father offered, wrapping an arm around his daughter's shoulder. Invented to keep you from performing the reunion ritual too soon. Although we were rather worried that one night that you were going to reunite with your memories much earlier than was foretold. Yes, but to see the true lengths of your power, it was worth everything. Nancy bit her finger coyly. Even worth Tom's life? Yes, well, we made certain that she was punished accordingly. Her mother joined in. Making her birth the continuance of your glory seemed appropriate. Punishment? Oh, please. The whole LeBlanc family laughed in unison. My stomach was churning endlessly now. The cotton candy machines at the carnival came to mind, tearing off pieces and sharing with lace. Pastor Daniels turned to shout at one of his altar boys. Go and sound the bell. The harvest comes and all must be in attendance. The teen nodded and took off, running past me. I simply knelt there, reeling from the shock of it all. As my brain came to slowly accept these revelations increment by increment, I could feel my body reacting. The thing in the pit of my soul, if I even still had one, the sensation that craved admiration, was growing. I began to feel twinklings of joy at the celebrations, but the vast majority of myself still objected. I refused to let that craving for tribute overwhelm me. Daniels came back towards me with a glass of wine. Admittedly, my lord, we were also scared of how much would return on the sunlight. Nothing was written of what you would regain over the years from the sunlight dancing on your skin, and the fields forbid what moonlight would do. Particles of your binding falling back over the years. The dreams, the memories, and that Murphy woman, why, she nearly ruined everything. Her and that fickle Lacey. Daniel sighed, then raised his glass. But alas, it would seem your influence only stayed minimal, unconscious, just as it always has, willing us to your desire and protection, as you deserve. To the 5 harvests. The hall bell began to toll. The party repeated the cheer. Glasses clinked. I swallowed down vomit. Why would you do this? I got out between sobs. Why? Stop fucking around, I screamed,
slamming my hand into the floorboards. "Answer me!" The table went back to their quiet, excited chatting, and Daniels kneeled beside me. "We do not question the wisdom of gods. Your intentions, your purposes, they are forever secret and concealed, only understandable by a mind as great as yours." My mother hugged me from behind. "My son, my king, welcome home." I didn't move. Any bit of motion, and I could feel it reclaim a small piece of my body. A strand of muscle fiber, a blood vessel, a cluster of nerve endings. Every second that passed, I was becoming more aware of the skin that I was wearing. I had become intelligent. Realization had made myth into truth, possible into actual, and belief was awakening the hunger of the 5 harvests. But there was a flicker in the back of my mind. Lace's last words replayed. "Remember who you are." Even if the unconscious will of myself was coming back to the surface, the rest of it was still in the sun. It couldn't take over fully. I could ride that line, blank humanity and stirring God, and put an end to this cult. If I was lucky. Syncriloquilites would be starved of worship by the time the sun went down. If these people were so willing to put all who didn't comply into the pyre, then I would remind them what a fearful thing it was to step and breathe beside their living God. I took the sickle in hand and stood, the bell accompanying my rise. Marie turned around and gave me a gentle smile, the same I'd known all these years. Taking a deep, shaky breath, I let the abyss begin to eat my human guilt and sensibilities. "I demand tribute." My mom and the pastor both gave me a look. "The grandest tribute you can offer." Mom frowned. Daniels tilted his head in confusion. "My lord, why do you forsake me?" The choir of wise returned. Pastor Daniels opened his mouth, but could not answer. I could sense the influence washing over him. "Then kneel," I commanded, raising the sickle. "The harvest comes." Epilogue. On that day, the people of Durum were culled. I started with the pastor to remove any sense of human leadership the rest of the flock could turn to for support. As I let them all grow, I felt the influencing factor of this God soul return under my will, like remembering how to ride a bicycle after years of never using one. I escaped from the reality of rendering the pastor's flesh from his bone by remembering my summer days of biking with Lace. Mother came next. She only cried, but kept a happy face for me. She had been so willing to obey all along. I guess she didn't mind one last act for her son. I tried to let the memories of my life pass in a blur, but it was difficult not to linger on certain moments. The day she rushed me home from my grandfather's, the first day of school, holding my hand at the festival. I couldn't hold back the tears long enough to make a clean cut. The tip of the sickle dug into her heart, and in seconds she was gone. I wanted to cut my own heart out afterwards to remove that pain, but it would only speed me towards the end of whatever humanity I had. Nancy screamed the entire time, though out of ecstasy or fear, I could not tell. Her stomach peeled away like the layers of an onion, eventually opening to the gestating mass in her womb. It bore similar qualities to the Sunchild. When its starburst eyes met mine, I hooked it with the sickle and churned like a butter maiden until it was no more. The same went for everybody else at the community hall, but there was a whole town that knew of me, of this god, and they were coming, answering the call of the bell. After putting Jenkins through it, I moved the meat grinder from his farm to the parking lot of the community hall, where the bell tolled without end. It moved because of my strength allowed it. It spun and chomped my believers because I made it so. They walked up to those steps,
and let themselves fall into false tribute because I willed it. The bloody pulp oozed down the conveyor, and with each worshipper removed, I felt simultaneously less and more towards them. It was a bad sign, to be sure, the sign of my fleeting human nature, abandoning care for their lives and instead relishing in the sacrifice of them. But my heart still ached, so I knew there was no time. I had to keep my eyes down as the children were prompted forward by their parents. Many were hesitant, but all eventually threw themselves into the shredder. I recall taking the tender hand of one trembling child and walking up the steps with him, before gesturing to the spinning, grinding wheels he was destined to meet. Perhaps believing that his God had good intentions made the child comply and kept his mother complacent. As the last few people tumbled to their doom, I heard a familiar voice from behind.
"No. How could you?"
I already knew it was Lace. I turned and saw her clutching her chest, falling to one knee as she let out animalistic cries from her tear-soaked face. I didn't blame her. I didn't condemn her. It was the correct reaction. The human reaction. Something I was quickly losing. She sniffed and refused to look at me any longer. I could sense the drum of her teardrops against the ground. "I hate that I loved you. After Duglin, I prayed to our God to give him back. But I was rejected, so I put that love into you, Piercy. Not knowing." Her fingernails chipped against the pavement as she pulled her fingers into balled fists. "And it was still me loving you, even in the end." The consistent knot in my throat tightened for the first and only time that evening. I wanted to let Lace go. I truly did. But even she had admitted to it. She loved me. And the Lord of the 5 Harvests would feast on that love, if given the chance. I could only offer one comfort to her. "You'll rest together. I'll see to it." I crafted her into mulch by hand. I waited until she was properly and fully deceased before starting, to spare her of any pain. It was hard to make the bone meal when my tears kept ruining the powder. Halfway down her spine, I heard the sound of an engine, and it stopped to my left. "Are we too late for the festival?" My head lifted to see Peter Murray leaning out of the driver's side window of his family sedan. The rest of the Murrays were inside. As his face fell to utter horror, I slowly shook my head without a word and returned to my work. The car was gone moments later, returning to whatever it had come from, anywhere but Durum. I searched for the finest topsoil, mixed Lacey in with it, and made a plot next to Duglin beneath that tree. That old bat, long since worn and chipped, served as her marker. The rest of the town I scattered across the fields with whatever dirt I could acquire. The fields would grow and feast on their sinful innards, but none would be harvested ever again. I set the animals free from their pens to roam the earth as they willed, and when I wished it, the buildings were set ablaze. I refused to allow any trace of this religion to continue tainting the world, a faith that spread like pestilence, usurping the beliefs of those who came before and forcing them to adopt to this sickening cycle of tribute. There was a strange irony to standing outside of Mr. Mayor's ice cream parlor as it collapsed in on itself, fire engulfing every corner of the store. And a thought crossed my mind as the heat licked my blood-splattered face. How much had Percy burned on the surface of that sun? Was that why the Sunchild appeared as it did? I walked towards the plains and up the hill, remembering the night I had spent fleeing from that creature with perfect recollection. The wind carried the smoke in the opposite direction I was headed, as I desired. Storm clouds formed overhead, ready to put out the flaming frenzy should it spread too close to my fields. And I continued to walk. The sky was a mosaic of every color conceivable, and the stars were beginning to creep out. The sun was getting ready to touch the earth, and once I had walked my fill, I sat upon the old chipped road to Durum, facing that blazing orange sphere. I was not Percy, but I wasn't the Lord of the 5 Harvests either. My soul may have been the blank slate of a god's, but it was the humanity that had been written upon it. A god is revered and worshipped by humans. The parts of me that were human were the times I'd spent with my friends and the bonds that we had formed, and those were the parts I chose to remember most. The sun began to dip into the horizon. I did not avert my gaze. The maw within was overflowing with glee, happily smacking on all the lives that it had just received as tribute. But it was short-sighted. If it regained control over this vessel, it would come to realize that there was no one left to worship it, and thus the god would starve. If it could have realized that, I was certain it would have already been killing me from the inside. The blink of a black figure appeared against the dying sunlight. I felt the twin leaves of a little sprout between my fingers, pushing its way through a crack in the asphalt. I smiled to myself, finally understanding the shape of the 5 Harvests' prayers. The Sunchild's eyes flickered at me in the distance, like a living lighthouse charging me down. My final work was complete. It pained me deeply to see it all go, having to be the one to destroy it, but it was done. Whatever I was, this in-between thing, I did not need this body any longer, hence why I called upon the Sunchild once again. If that thing was Percy's soul, then he could reclaim his body and finally live the life that he had been robbed of. If it was the rest of the synchrolicolites, then the plan would still go into effect. The hunger would finish taking over, learn that it had been played, and then starve out as it roamed the fields of Durum for something to shower in its religious adoration. But I did not know which would happen, and I did not care. Any indifference was absolute, as it always had been, save for the days when she was near. And now, in that final moment, the only thing I felt was the warm wind of destruction tussling the god's, Percy's hair from behind. I gently closed my eyes, and the sun burned into the backs of my lids for the last time. Good night.